Chapter 219. With this finger, Chu Luiyue would be severely injured even if she didn't die. Chu Luiyue stared at the blue finger that was approaching her. She was very clear that the gap between the two of them was too big. Any small tricks or schemes would be useless at this moment. Therefore she had to do her best. She wanted to win. Then she flipped her wrist and took out 2 items from her Qinquan bag. At this moment the finger was already in front of her. She was about to be completely crushed. The outside of the arena was silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on this place. Chu Ning stood up abruptly and was extremely anxious. If Situ Ziyue dared to kill Yu he would stop him no matter what. Sun Zhongyan was also frowning. He planned to make a move at any time. It didn't matter if Chu Luiyue lost this round. However, if there were any serious sequelae, the loss would outweigh the gain. Moreover, if something happened to Chu Luiyue, how would he explain it to his martial uncle? Well, the burning flame on the giant finger suddenly flew out rapidly and completely surrounded Chu Luiyue. Exclamations came from the crowd. It's over. Chu Luiyue will lose for sure. How is it just losing for sure? That ice flame finger is one of Situ Ziyue's trump cards. It's extremely powerful. I heard that there was once someone who wanted to assassinate him but was killed by Situ Ziyue in the end. I'm afraid Chu Luiyue won't be able to withstand this flame. If she admits defeat now, she might suffer less. God, what is Situ Ziyue trying to do? In the arena, Situ Ziyue was crazily pouring his force into the ice flame finger. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The flames, which were already surging fiercely, suddenly surged up. Chu Luiyue's figure completely disappeared. Under the ice flame finger, a clear indentation had already appeared on the white jade floor. The ground around the flame that surrounded Chu Luiyue was directly charred black. Was he trying to kill Chu Luiyue? Sun Zhongyan suddenly stood up. Situ Ziyu, are you trying to kill me on the spot? Before Situ Ziyu could say anything, Qinghan had already spoken. Brother Qinghan, why are you in such a hurry? Chu Luiyue had the wooden token of the Qin Jiao competition on him. If something really happened, the wooden token would automatically crack open as a warning. But now wasn't he still fine? Why are you so worried? Sun Zhongyan was so angry that his face turned pale. Of course he knew that Chu Luiyue was still alive. But if he waited until the wooden tablet cracked, it would be too late. That girl was his martial uncle's only disciple after so many years. She was also a genius that he thought highly of. If she died just like that, he would definitely not let the matter rest. Qinghan, you have to think carefully. If something happens to her, you won't be able to afford it. Qinghan did not think so. Instead he laughed and said, didn't Brother Zhongyan say yesterday that the children had a sense of propriety? I watched Ziyue grow up. He has always been steady and would never do anything overboard. Sun Zhongyan knew that Qinghan was just being unreasonable. He could not be bothered with him and decided to charge forward. Qinghan also stood up with a cold expression on his face. Brother Zhongyan, are you going to break the rules first? Sun Zhongyan did not say anything and was about to make a move. Chu Luiyue was enveloped in that ball of fire and there was no movement at all. He was afraid that something bad was going to happen. On the other side, Chu Ning had already jumped down from her seat and rushed toward the arena. However, at that moment the situation on the arena suddenly changed. With Chu Luiyue as the center, several silver streams of light suddenly appeared. Buzz. A strange buzzing sound could be heard. It instantly spread throughout the entire Jianan square. Sun Zhongyan suddenly looked up and Chu Ning immediately stopped as well. The silver streams of light were still increasing. Moreover, they were intertwining. Situ Ziyu gradually frowned, and a trace of uneasiness appeared in his heart. For some reason he seemed to have sensed a dangerous aura. Buzz. The buzzing sound became clearer and clearer. The intertwining streams of light finally formed. Fu Yunshan stood up in shock. A 4th-level Xian formation? This kind of pressure, this kind of aura, and that complicated pattern. As a Xian master, Sun Zhongyan had already realized something the moment the streams of light appeared. At that moment, when he saw the gigantic Xian formation on the arena, his heart raced. That was indeed a 4th-level Xian formation. A clear female voice suddenly rang out. Buddha Lotus Formation. The streams of light intertwined on the Xian formation, and it looked like a lotus flower that was blooming beautifully. Boom, boom, boom. A terrifying aura spread out from the Xian formation. At the same time, the ice-fire finger that was approaching Chu Liyue suddenly shattered. The flames that had originally enveloped her fell like sparks and scattered in all directions. A slender and straight figure appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Chu Liyue was actually not dead. In fact, her body was unharmed, and there were no injuries at all. She was holding a palm-sized black crystal in her hand. Countless streams of light were flowing out from that crystal. "It's the Black Crystal Xian formation," someone cried out in surprise. After a momentary daze, almost everyone's face was filled with shock. It was normal for a Xian master to be able to activate a Black Crystal Xian formation, but Chu Liyue was clearly a Stage 2 Xian master. How could she activate a 4th-level Black Crystal Xian formation? Xianxia, on the other hand, lost her composure and widened her eyes as she stared at Chu Liyue's other hand. A small crystal ball was faintly discernible. That's crystal barrier. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 220. A gigantic silver Buddha lotus bloomed in the arena. When the petals gently waved, they easily swallowed the blue flames and extinguished them. Everything was carried out silently, but it was enough to make one's scalp tingle. Situ Ziyue's move, which was supposed to win, was actually resolved by Chu Liyue just like that. Seeing that Chu Liyue was unharmed, Chu Ning's anxious heart finally calmed down. Even though he knew that Yu wouldn't risk her life, he couldn't help but worry when he saw it with his own eyes. Thankfully, she can always make me feel at ease at the crucial moment. Sun Zhongyan's actions also suddenly paused as he stared at the arena in shock. What exactly happened just now? How did Chu Liyue withstand Situ Ziyue's attack and activate the 4th-level Xian formation? However, a thought surfaced in his mind uncontrollably. During the midterm assessment back then, I felt that this girl seemed to be hiding her abilities. Now it seems like it's true. Cheng Han finally couldn't sit still, but before he could speak, Situ Xianxia had already stood up and hurriedly walked forward with a face full of disbelief. How can this be? How can this be? Situ Xianxia couldn't help but mumble softly, not daring to believe her eyes. She really hoped that she saw wrongly. However, the crystal barrier is indeed in Chu Liyue's hands. This is the only way to explain why Chu Liyue was unharmed after Situ Ziyue's attack. Xianxia, what's wrong? Sensing her abnormality, Cheng Han couldn't care about anything else and immediately went forward to ask. Situ Xianxia subconsciously clenched her fists. Seems like I've indeed neglected too many things. This Chu Liyue is hiding too many secrets. She took a deep breath in, suppressed her emotions and shook her head. Nothing. I'm just a little worried about brother. Cheng Han patted her shoulders. Don't worry. Chu Liyue is just a Stage 2 Xian master. She must have used up most of her energy to activate the Black Crystal Xian formation. She can't completely unleash its effects. After all, Ziyue is a Stage 4 warrior. Chu Liyue won't be his match. She just needs to spend more effort. Situ Xianxia took a look and indeed saw that Chu Liyue's lips were a little pale. She then relaxed and returned to her seat. The others quickly noticed this as well. The people from Tianlu Academy who had just heaved a sigh of relief started to worry again. How did Chu Liyue activate that 4th-level Black Crystal Profound formation? This problem isn't the most important thing right now. The most important thing is that with her strength she won't be able to hold on for long. I'm afraid this match is still dangerous. Situ Ziyue's strength is tyrannical after all. If Chu Liyue was a true level 4 mystic cultivator, his chances of victory would definitely be extremely high, but now, Chu Liyue ignored all these discussions. At this moment, all of her energy was focused on the Black Crystal Xian formation. After returning from Wanling mountain range, she thought about it and felt that she was in a very dangerous situation. If she didn't have any trump cards, she wouldn't be safe. Hence she went to Jinbao Pavilion and bought it from Second Master Yan. She originally wanted to use it when she was in danger, but the situation was urgent now, so she couldn't care less. The level 4 mystic formation engraved on it didn't consume much force, so she could activate it with her own strength. However, she couldn't unleash its full power. There were actually 2 layers to the lotus on the mystic formation. However, with her current strength she could only activate 1 layer. The other layer still didn't have any movement. After a short while she could already feel the strength in her body rapidly depleting. It wouldn't be long before he would collapse. This could temporarily stop Situ Ziyue, but it was still very difficult for her to win. No wonder you dared to challenge me directly. It turns out that you have such confidence. Situ Ziyue's expression gradually turned cold. However, if you think you can win like this, you're too naive. Before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly leaped up. At the same time, a saber suddenly appeared in his hand. It was a long saber that was greenish-black in color. The blade wasn't sharp and was even a little blunt. There was a strange pattern engraved on the blade. It's the Ling Xiao saber. Someone suddenly cried out in alarm. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. The Ling Xiao saber was a national treasure of country Xingluo's royal family. It was rumored that the founding emperor of country Xingluo used this Ling Xiao saber to carve out a piece of the world. Not only was the Ling Xiao saber powerful, but it was also a symbol of status. Now that it was in Situ Ziyue's hands, it almost proved that he was the next emperor of country Xingluo. It's your honor to be able to force me to use the Ling Xiao saber, Situ Ziyue said coldly. At the same time he held the saber with both hands and slashed it down fiercely. A terrifying greenish-black blade flew out quickly. In the blink of an eye, the blade directly pierced through the center of the blooming lotus. The huge mystic formation was instantly split in half. Whoosh! This slash directly split the mystic formation, and countless violent forces scattered in all directions. Chu Liyue quickly retreated, but she was still affected by the force of the attack. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying force crashed into her body. Her internal organs seemed to have been squeezed into a ball. Chu Liyue's chest shook and she spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood splattered on her lapel and dyed it red. As for her aura, it instantly withered away. Situ Ziyue's movements were too fast. She didn't even have time to use the colored glass barrier. The originally dazzling mystic formation began to dim at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone watched this scene in silence. Everyone could see that Chu Liyue was bound to lose this time. Even if she was at her peak, she might not be Situ Ziyue's opponent, let alone now when she was heavily injured. Situ Ziyue held the Ling Xiao saber and looked down at Chu Liyue. His eyes were indifferent, as if he was looking at an ant. After a moment, his thin lips opened slightly and coldly spat out a few words. You overestimate yourself. As he spoke, he raised his saber again. This time it's time to end it. Chu Liyue looked up and saw the second saber flying towards her at an even faster speed. She swung her arm and threw out the colored glass barrier. A transparent enchantment with a faint silver glow enveloped her in an instant. Bang! The saber collided with the colored glass barrier and made a dull sound. However, the glazed barrier only shook slightly before it quickly devoured the terrifying power. Chu Liyue, who was standing inside, was not affected at all. After Situ Ziyue saw clearly what it was, a look of disgust flashed across his eyes. Extremely cunning. Do you really think that you can hide in here forever? Chu Liyue wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and glanced at him. Don't worry, I won't make you wait for long. What? Situ Ziyue frowned and saw Chu Liyue sitting cross-legged inside the colored glass barrier. Then she placed her hands on her knees and closed her eyes. The corner of Situ Ziyue's eyes twitched. Chu Liyue swallowed the thick smell of blood in her mouth and said word by word. Wait for me to break through first. God damn it, she actually wants to break through at this time. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 221. Chu Liyue only realized that something was wrong with her dantian after Situ Ziyue used the Ling Xiao saber to break the Xian formation. She didn't feel anything then, but after the black crystal Xian formation backfired, the water droplet in her dantian seemed to be stimulated by something and started to spin rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already swallowed all the force that was stored in her dantian. And it didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. She then realized that she was about to break through. During the intense battle with Situ Ziyue, she had been waiting and thinking of ways to break through to become a stage 2 warrior, but nothing happened. Who would have thought that at this moment? Chu Liyue was speechless when she said it out loud. This kind of probability was really hard to come by. Luckily, she had the crystal barrier that Rong Xiu left behind, which could help her hold on for a while. Otherwise she would have to admit defeat and leave the stage. After clearing her mind, Chu Liwei closed her eyes and started to absorb the surrounding heaven and earth force in an attempt to break through. Soon, the rich heaven and earth force surged toward her and entered her body through the crystal barrier. Everyone in the square was dead silent when they saw this scene. Some even rubbed their eyes hard to make sure that they weren't seeing things. Chu Liwei, she's actually trying to break through in the middle of the Qingjiao competition. What is going on? Situ Ziyue was embarrassed and angry. Chu Liu's actions were simply looking down on him. He swung his saber again to attack, but the crystal barrier was too strong and couldn't be broken. Chu Liu sat inside and didn't move at all. He was focused on breaking through. Situ Ziyue only felt that he had been greatly humiliated. He clenched his saber's hilt tightly and couldn't wait to cut the crystal barrier open and finish Chu Liu off completely. When Qing Han saw this situation, he also felt that he could not keep his face. Brother Zhongyan, isn't Chu Liu going overboard by doing this? She's looking down on Ziyue and the Qingjiao competition. Sun Zhongyan was also stunned by Chu Liu's actions. However, she was one of them, so he had to side with her. Oh, Liu is just trying to break through. She's not cheating or anything. Brother Qing Han, aren't you going overboard? I don't think so. Qin pointed at Chu Liu, who was on the stage with an ugly expression on her face. The Qingjiao competition is a competition, not a place for cultivation. If she didn't do it on purpose, why did she choose to break through at this moment? Who knows how long it will take for her to break through? I don't think there's any need to continue this competition. All sorts of situations can happen on the path of cultivation. Not to mention this little girl, even this old man can't control the timing of my breakthrough. How can this be wrong? What's more, Ziyu could also take advantage of this opportunity to recuperate. It wouldn't be considered a loss, right? If the competition is Liu's. Of course, Chu Liu loses. She hasn't lost yet. Why did she admit defeat? Moreover, the result of the competition might be different after she breaks through. At the very least, it'll be a draw. Qing Han gritted his teeth and cursed Sun Zhongyan for being so shameless. A draw? How could Chu Liu be worthy of a draw with Situ Ziyue? Sun Zhongyan chuckled and asked, why? Brother Qing Han, are you worried that Liu will win the competition after she breaks through? Qing Han sneered. You seem to think highly of her. When Chu Liu has to have the ability to do so. Situ Ziyue suddenly said, since the competition isn't over yet, I'll wait. He wanted to see how much Chu Liu's abilities would increase after breaking through in such a big way. Since Situ Ziyue had said so, the others naturally couldn't object. Hence they all quieted down. Time passed by slowly. Qing Han gradually became impatient and sized up the crystal barrier around Chu Liu. This Chu Liu really hid her abilities well. She actually has such a treasure with her. No wonder she was so arrogant previously. I think that she relied on this item to safely dodge Ziyue's ice flame finger. His tone was filled with dissatisfaction and even a little jealousy. This crystal barrier was extremely precious, and even he couldn't find it. Chu Liu's identity wasn't the most prestigious, but she had quite a few good items on her. I wonder where she found this item. He might have used some tricks. Situ Xianxia listened at the side and didn't say anything, but she felt upset. I've only seen one person with this item. If I didn't see wrongly, this crystal barrier clearly belongs to that person. If not, even the tiny engravings on it wouldn't be exactly the same. How could Chu Liu have such a precious item? Of course, someone gave it to her. However, what kind of relationship does that person have with Chu Liu? Why is he so good that he would give her the crystal barrier? Situ Xianxia couldn't think of anything on Chu Liu that could be exchanged for the crystal barrier. Also, according to that person's character, if he wasn't willing, who could snatch his things away? At the thought of this, Situ Xianxia's heart felt like it was being scratched and she felt terrible. She had been in the imperial city for a few days, but she hadn't seen that person. To avoid arousing suspicion, she didn't even purposely send people to find out. However, she couldn't sit still now. Chu Liu ignored all the noise around her, focused and started to prepare for the breakthrough. However, she quickly realized that she didn't need to do much. The water droplet in her dantian was spinning rapidly and ripples spread out from it. Even the engravings on it floated along with it. The surrounding heaven and earth force kept surging in and flowed into her dantian through her limbs and bones before being swallowed by the water droplet. The ripples became bigger and bigger. Chu Liyue couldn't help but feel nervous. What she didn't know was that a force whirlpool had appeared above her head along with this movement. The onlookers could also clearly feel the fluctuations of origin power around her. Some people started to whisper to each other. Wasn't Chu Liyue a stage 1 warrior previously? Even if she broke through, she should have become a stage 2 warrior, right? But why is the movement so big? You felt it too? I even felt that there wasn't such a movement when I broke through to become a stage 3 warrior back then. But she's already very strong, so this seems normal. Bai Qin glanced at Sun Zhongyan and softly asked, Elder Sun, what do you think? Sun Zhongyan's expression was solemn. This movement is indeed unusual. Normal cultivators will only form a force whirlpool when they break through to become a stage 4 warrior. Bai Qin was shocked. You mean, she might break through consecutively? Sun Zhongyan shook his head. That's not very possible. Consecutively breaking through is just a rumor. In fact, normal cultivators can't do it. But it seems like there's another reason for her to do this. What is it? Sun Zhongyan pursed his lips. Looking at Chu Liyue in the arena, a vague thought flashed through his mind. But because this thought was too shocking, he didn't dare to believe it for a moment. After a while, he finally looked at Bai Qin seriously. When this girl entered the academy, what was her Yuan Meridian level? Bai Qin was stunned. Yuan Meridian level? She didn't take it. Because she entered the academy halfway and didn't prepare enough for the exam, she didn't take it. He felt a little guilty when he said the second half of the sentence. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't prepare enough, but he felt that Chu Liyue wouldn't be able to pass the exam, so he didn't prepare for it. Sun Zhongyan saw through his thoughts at a glance, but he didn't expose him. In fact, it wasn't just Bai Qin. Everyone thought so at that time. Who would have expected that in just a few months, Chu Liyue would become the best in their academy? Why? Do you think there's a problem with her Yuan Meridian? As Bai Qin spoke, he suddenly realized something and widened his eyes in shock. Wait a minute. Elder Sun was asking about Chu Liyue's Yuan Meridian level. Could he be suspecting that Chu Liyue has a Daijing Yuan Meridian? That's impossible. Bai Qin couldn't help but mutter. One had to know that in the entire country Yaoqin, there hadn't been a Daijing Yuan Meridian in 100 years. Sun Zhongyan's gaze was grave, but his heart was beating wildly. Without a test, no one can say for sure. It was fine if he didn't think of this, but once this thought popped up, he couldn't suppress it. This was the only way to explain why Chu Liyue's cultivation speed was so fast after recovering her Yuan Meridian and stepping into the path of cultivation. Otherwise, how could she rely on her rank as a stage 1 warrior to win consecutively? Just as his heart was in a mess because of this, there was a sudden fluctuation in the arena. Chu Liyue had broken through. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 222. Crimson red force surged out from Chu Liyue's body and enveloped her like a blazing flame. The aura on her body had already risen to its peak. Chu Liyue only saw that there seemed to be an invisible hand on the water droplet that steadily drew a second line. Bang! In her mind there was a soft and clear sound. Her internal and external injuries quickly healed and the force in her dantian was even more abundant than before. In the next moment she suddenly opened her eyes. A faint red glow flashed across her clear and sharp eyes. Rank 2 warrior. She looked at her palm and felt the surging force in her body. She couldn't help but smile. She finally broke through. After such a long wait, her previous efforts were not in vain. Although she didn't know why she suddenly broke through today, but at this very moment, it was indeed a good thing for her. Seeing Chu Liyue break through, the originally quiet plaza became restless again. Chu Liyue raised her hand and kept the crystal barrier. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Situ Ziyue, who was standing opposite her, and smiled. Sorry to keep you waiting. Situ Ziyue quietly sized up Chu Liyue and unconsciously frowned. Chu Liyue's breakthrough this time actually didn't take too much time. It only took about the time for an incense stick to burn. But after breaking through, she was obviously different from before. The most obvious thing was that the aura on her body was much stronger than before. In addition, the injuries on her body seemed to have mostly healed because of the breakthrough just now. She had only broken through from a rank 1 warrior to a rank 2 warrior. How did Chu Liyue's body undergo such a huge change? He raised the Ling Xiao saber in his hand and the icy blue force quickly enveloped it. The strange pattern on it was faintly discernible. This time, you shouldn't have any other reason to delay the match, right? It's time to end it. Chu Liyue chuckled. What a coincidence, I think so too. As she spoke, she picked up the black crystal Xian formation again. With a thought, force gushed out. Buzz buzz. The black crystal Xian formation shone brightly. Soon streaks of light flew out again. It quickly formed a huge Xian formation under Chu Liyue's feet. The originally dimmed Buddhist lotus slowly bloomed once more. Situ Ziyue sneered. Do you think you can win by using the same trick twice? The Ling Xiao saber in his hand suddenly slashed down. Falling clouds of flowers. Following this shout, the pattern on the blade suddenly moved. Then a small cloud creeper flower suddenly bloomed. The trumpet flower slowly moved along the groove on the blade. With every inch he moved, the trumpet flowers grew a little bigger. When it slid to the tip of the blade, the trumpet flower was almost as big as a lantern. Go! Situ Ziyu shouted in a low voice. The trumpet flower flew up gracefully, falling towards Chu Liyue. Compared to the Buddhist lotus blooming under Chu Liyue's feet, the trumpet flower was much smaller. It was not even as big as one of the petals. However, no one dared to underestimate this cloud creeper flower. It slowly flew forward and cracks gradually appeared on the ground that it passed by. One could see how strong its suppression was. Chu Liyue looked up and glanced at it. Even though there was still a distance between them, she could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in it. The indescribable suppression made her body tense up, and she found it hard to breathe. Falling clouds of flowers. Isn't that one of the 3 ultimate moves of the Ling Xiao saber? Situ Ziyue can actually use it now. It seems like he's really going to break through and become a stage 5 warrior. The force in his body is actually so abundant. He seems to be only 21 years old this year. Speaking of which, he's even younger than Rongjin, but he's only 1 step away from becoming a stage 5 warrior. If he breaks through, he'll probably become the youngest stage 5 warrior. Seeing the trumpet flower in the air, the crowd couldn't hide their shock as they discussed fervently. Rongjin, who had been watching this competition from the side, had a cold expression when he heard this. He was the most famous genius in country Yaochen, but he was indeed lacking compared to Situ Ziyue. In the past few years, the two of them had fought a few times, but Rongjin lost more than he won. This was especially so in the Qingjiao competition last year, where he lost completely. He originally thought that after a year of cultivation he could catch up to Situ Ziyue and even surpass him. However, looking at the current situation, the gap between the two of them had become even bigger. Not mentioning other things, just the Buddha lotus formation that Chu Liyue used just now already required a lot of effort for him to deal with it. Thinking of this, he felt even more aggrieved. His jaw tightened and the surrounding aura was as cold as ice. The trumpet flower was getting closer and closer. However, if the surrounding people took a closer look, they would notice that Chu Liyue wasn't panicking at all. She retracted her gaze and quietly looked at the black Xian formation in her hands. Success or failure depends on this, muttered Chu Liyue softly. Then she injected all the force in her body into it without holding back. Hong! A sound suddenly came from the black Xian formation. Situ Ziyue chuckled. You're about to die, yet you still don't regret. Suddenly, the mocking smile at the corner of his mouth froze. His eyes were filled with shock. He saw that under Chu Liyue's feet, under the Buddha lotus that was slowly blooming, countless rays of light were gathering. In just an instant, even more petals had formed. Chu Liyue had actually activated the second layer of the Buddha lotus on the black Xian formation. In other words, she had used her own strength to activate the full power of this level 4 Xian formation. Looking at the Buddha lotus that was passionately blooming with layers of petals, Situ Ziyue's heart suddenly felt uneasy. It wasn't that he didn't know the power of a level 4 Xian formation. At this moment, the trumpet flower had already flown in front of Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue suddenly waved her hand in front of her. That Buddhist lotus also suddenly moved forward according to her will. Its speed wasn't fast, but the distance between the trumpet flower and Chu Liyue was already not far. Therefore, it didn't take much time for the Buddha lotus and the trumpet flower to confront each other. Buzz. The petals of the Buddha lotus swayed gently. The trumpet flower's flying speed suddenly decreased by a lot. Buzz. The layers of petals swayed with the wind. The trumpet flower had completely stopped. It was hanging right above the Buddha lotus. Chu Liyue's clear voice instantly rang out, "Close." As her voice fell, the petals of the Buddha lotus started to close gradually. The trumpet flower seemed to have lost control and fell down. The layers of petals instantly closed up and completely covered it. Situ Ziyue's face suddenly paled a little. After some time, the Buddha lotus bloomed again. Its petals were already damaged by a lot. It was obvious that it had used up a lot of energy in the fight just now. However, the Buddha lotus that was originally aggressive now looked like it had been defeated. It fell to the ground dispiritedly without any signs of life. Situ Ziyu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 223. At the same time, his aura quickly weakened. Ling Xiao blade was connected to him. Now that his move was broken, he would naturally suffer a backlash. He was furious and indignant. He wanted to stand up immediately, but he was too anxious, and anger attacked his heart. This movement caused him to fall to the ground and spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. His face was as pale as a ghost. "Brother." Situ Xianxia frantically stood up and rushed toward the competition venue. But when she reached the side of the venue, a voice suddenly traveled to her ears. "Eldest Princess Situ, if you go on stage now, it'll be considered his loss." Situ Xianxia's body froze and she stopped in her tracks as she turned around. Chu Liyue was standing on stage and looked at her lazily in a seemingly smiling manner. Situ Xianxia clenched her fists in her sleeves. "Chu Liyue. I'm here." Chu Liyue seemed to not hear the anger in Situ Xianxia's voice as he lifted his chin. "I think your brother still wants to fight. It doesn't seem appropriate for you to go up now." Situ Xianxia was so angry that her face changed. She looked at Situ Ziyue again. Standing closer, she could see the messy bloodstains on his face and body even more clearly. Her heart seemed to have been harshly stabbed with a knife, and it hurt immensely. "Brother." Situ Ziyue heard her voice and looked up with much difficulty. "Xianxia, go back." As he spoke, he supported his body and tried to stand up. But his internal injuries were too serious, so he fell down again when he stood up halfway. Situ Xianxia's eyes were quickly filled with tears. In her heart, her brother had always been the most outstanding warrior genius. He was always high-spirited and full of vigor, proud of himself. When had he ever been in such a pathetic state? And the person who caused all of this was Chu Liyue. "Brother." Situ Xianxia wanted to persuade him not to continue, but anyone could tell that he no longer had the strength to fight. Even though Chu Liyue's strength was depleted and his lips were pale, he wasn't injured. If the two of them continued fighting, the outcome wouldn't change. Instead, it would make her brother's situation worse. But she couldn't say this out loud. Her brother was such a proud person, how could he admit to losing to a rank 2 warrior? Chu Liyue looked at Situ Ziyue with a smile. "If you still want to continue, I will accompany you to the end." In other words, if Situ Ziyu did not take the initiative to admit defeat, she would continue to fight to the death. Everyone looked at this scene with complicated expressions. Before the match, before the time it took for an incense stick to burn, who would have thought that Chu Liyue would gain the upper hand in the end? Moreover, he was actually able to force Situ Ziyu to such an extent. Qing Han finally couldn't stand it any longer. "Xianxia, help your brother down." Situ Xianxia glanced at him hesitantly before she finally lifted her skirt and prepared to go on stage. "Oh no." Situ Ziyu shook his head, his brows tightly knitted together. If he were to step down now, wouldn't he lose completely? "Bring him down." Qing Han's voice became much harsher. Situ Xianxia paused in her steps, but she still stepped forward in the end. Everyone fell silent for a moment. This meant that Situ Ziyue had lost. "Brother, let's go down." Situ Xianxia held his arm and said with heartache. Situ Ziyu was furious as he angrily waved his arm, wanting to fling her away. However, his actions were weak and he couldn't even break free from Situ Xianxia's grip. Situ Xianxia bit her lower lip and finally understood why her mentor directly asked her to help her brother down. He's actually so severely injured. Situ Xianxian helped Situ Ziyu up without any explanation. Brother, let's talk when we get back. Situ Ziyu didn't want to leave with his tail between his legs. That would be a huge humiliation. However, he knew his own body's condition very well. Even if he continued to stay, he wouldn't have any chances of winning. He stared deeply at Chu Luiyue, his eyes filled with anger and hatred. Chu Luiyue ignored him and continued to wave with a smile. Take care. Situ Ziyu spat out another mouthful of blood. Situ Xianxian's heart tightened and she finally couldn't help but turn around and stare at Chu Luiyue. She enunciated each word clearly and said, Mentor once told me not to be depressed when I lose and not to be arrogant when I win. If not, I don't know when I'll suffer a huge setback. When that time comes, it'll definitely be very painful. Chu Luiyue blinked. Director Qing Han is indeed a person of virtue and prestige, and his words are very logical. However, her gaze turned and landed on Situ Ziyu as she regretfully said, Unfortunately, it's a pity. Your brother doesn't seem to have heard of this before. Look, he suffered a huge setback in front of me, didn't he? Situ Xianxian was stumped. I've never seen such a shameless person who inverts right and wrong. Situ Ziyu was about to faint from anger. He raised his arm as if he wanted to do something, but it drooped down weakly in the end. I hope you'll always be so smug. Situ Xianxian stared deeply at Chu Luiyue and didn't say anything else as she turned around and left with Situ Ziyu. Chu Luiyue watched the two of them leave and her lips curled up. Thank you for your blessings. I'll definitely work hard. Situ Xianxian's heart was in turmoil. How did that person interact with such a woman? Scheming, cunning, scheming. What exactly is he thinking? Could it be, just because of that face? Situ Xianxian's heart was filled with thoughts. Even after she brought Situ Ziyu away, her heart still couldn't calm down. However, Chu Luiyue didn't even care about them. She only cared about one thing now. Elder son, according to the rules, I'm now in the second round, right? Sun Zhongyan's heart couldn't be described with the word, shocked. Chu Luiyue's series of performances had already made him extremely proud and elated. When he thought of that possibility again, he really couldn't like Chu Luiyue anymore. Of course. He looked around and said confidently, Tian Zhongyan, this is the first round. For this round, Tianlu Academy's Chu Luiyue wins. Qing Jiao competition's preliminary ranking. Chu Luiyue succeeded in his challenge and is ranked first. His low and deep voice instantly reverberated throughout the entire square. Mobile users, please browse the internet for a better reading experience. Chapter 224. Chu Luiyue actually succeeded in her challenge. Sun Zhongyan's voice was like a clap of thunder that instantly woke everyone up from their shock. That's right. She had challenged Situ Ziyu, who was ranked first. Now that Situ Ziyu had admitted defeat, she naturally became first. Even though they had seen the competition with their own eyes, this fact was still unbelievable. Not only had Chu Luiyue won, but she had also broken through in the process. This sounded like a fairy tale, but it had actually happened before their eyes. They had no choice but to believe it. Even the Tianlu Academy crowd was dumbfounded and could not recover from their shock for a long time. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly before she left the stage. However, she did not return to her seat directly. Instead, she walked toward Chu Ning. Father. When Chu Ning saw her coming down, she quickly walked up to her and grabbed her arm. She looked her up and down and asked nervously, Are you okay? The competition had been so intense just now, and he had watched from the side with trepidation. Chu Luiyue spread her hands and smiled until her eyes curved into crescents. You're a stage 5 warrior. Can't you tell if I'm injured? Chu Ning had personally checked her and found that other than using too much force, she did not have any serious problems. Thus he was relieved. Upon hearing this, he could not help but laugh. So what if you're a stage 5 warrior? Now you can defeat a peak stage 4 warrior. I'm afraid that before long even I won't be your opponent. He was worried, but he was also proud and happy. The competition just now could be said to have been a perilous one. He was very clear that if you had not broken through at the last moment, they would have definitely lost this round. Fortunately, it was a close call in the end. Chu Luiyue winked playfully. How is that the same? Father will always be the most powerful in you, heart. However, this time you can finally rest assured, right? After the Wanling Mountain incident, Chu Ning did not say anything on the surface, but she knew in her heart that he was traumatized. Even when both of them were at home, he would often call her name. If he couldn't see it for a while, he would be nervous and anxious. After experiencing the loss of his daughter, he began to worry about his gains and losses. Chu Luiyue wanted to make him feel at ease, so he didn't play any extra tricks on the field today and went all out. Now that he won against Situ Ziyu, Chu Ning was clearly much more appeased. How could Chu Ning not know what she was thinking? Emotions surged in his heart and even his eyes became a little hot. He squeezed Chu Luiyue's shoulder. His lips moved, but his throat seemed to be choked. After a while he said, "Her is naturally the best." Chu Luiyue smiled obediently. "Then I'll go back first. Maybe someone will challenge me later." "You should also go back and sit down." Chu Ning agreed and urged her to get some rest. The two of them separated and returned to their respective positions. However, Chu Ning's gaze never left Chu Luiyue's body. He watched her walk back, watched the crowd from Tianlu Academy cheering enthusiastically, and watched countless people looking at her with envy and amazement. Chu Ning let out a long sigh. His eyes were slightly red, but he couldn't help but smile. His Yu-er was no longer the cowardly girl who could be bullied by others. Now she was like the sun in the clouds, shining brightly. Chu Luiyue's return was once again welcomed by the people from the academy. However, she keenly sensed that the atmosphere seemed to be different from yesterday. How should she put it? Everyone seemed to have an inexplicable respect for her. Whether it was their speech, actions, or anything else, they seemed to be more reserved than before. The way they looked at her was also a little strange. Chu Luiyue touched her face. "Is there something on my face?" Everyone was silent for a moment. Xiang gave her a thumbs up. "You have the glow of a genius." Chu Luiyue was speechless. Xiang's glib tongue was just like a dog's mouth. Nothing good could come out of it. She looked at Mu Hongyu. What's wrong with them? She just went up to fight. Why did she feel that something was wrong when she came back? Mu Hongyu hugged the golden mane bear cub and looked at Chu Luiyue. She swallowed her saliva with difficulty. "Luyu, did you deliberately hide your strength before?" "That was Situ Ziyu. He actually won too. She even made him vomit blood. Think about how arrogant he was before. In the blink of an eye, he was completely defeated." Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. "Which time are you talking about?" Mu Hongyu was speechless. How many times?" She closed her eyes. "Pretend I didn't ask." Her brain must have short-circuited for her to ask such a question. From the moment she entered the academy until now, which one of her achievements didn't show her extraordinary talent and strength? To think that she always felt that the gap between them wasn't that big. "I must cultivate diligently in the future." Xin Hu nodded vigorously. Gu Mingfeng looked up at Chu Luiyue and gave her a meaningful look. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She returned to her seat and sat down. The surroundings gradually quieted down, but the curious and amazed gazes did not decrease at all. She didn't care and planned to close her eyes and rest. However, Si Ting suddenly spoke up. "Who gave you the crystal barrier?" Chu Luiyue looked at him in confusion. "Who?" Si Ting narrowed his eyes. "The person you like." Chu Luiyue paused and nodded slightly. "Yes." Si Ting was silent for a moment. "You seem to really like him." With that, he turned his head. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why did Si Ting say that so strangely? Didn't she just use the crystal barrier? But seeing that he didn't seem to want to talk about it, she didn't ask anymore. She took out the small silver ball and played with it in her hand. Si Ting sighed softly in his heart. At this moment he could finally let it go completely. He thought that it was just an excuse, but he didn't expect it to be true. Perhaps even she herself did not realize that when she mentioned that person, the corners of her mouth unconsciously curled up into a smile, just how moving it was. He didn't know who had the luck to win her heart. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 225. After Chu Luiyue won this round, the situation in the arena immediately changed. The remaining few people looked at her from time to time with different expressions, but they were obviously more serious. They thought that Chu Luiyue would be at the bottom of the last 10 people, but who knew that she would defeat Situ Ziyu and take first place? This time they had to re-evaluate Chu Luiyue. Previously, when she was a Stage 1 warrior, she defeated 2 Stage 4 warriors consecutively. After breaking through to Stage 2, she even defeated a Stage 4 warrior. This result was enough to make Chu Luiyue famous. If they wanted to take first place, they had to surpass Chu Luiyue. Sun Zhongyan looked at a young man from Nanfeng Academy. Yi Chenjia, it's your turn to choose. Yi Chenjia was ranked 9th in front of Chu Luiyue. According to the rules, it was his turn to choose one of the top 5 to challenge. Yi Chenjia seemed to be prepared. He went up the stage and cupped his hands at a young man from Taiyan Academy. Nanfeng Academy's Yi Chenjia challenges Taiyan Academy's Su Tingfeng. Seeing him make such a choice, everyone nodded subconsciously. Clearly, they felt that it was within their expectations. Su Tingfeng was ranked 5th. It was obvious that he was the easiest to challenge among the top 5. Yi Chenjia choosing him was the safest choice. Su Tingfeng laughed heartily and with a leap he jumped onto the arena. Please. Seeing the two of them fighting, some people started discussing in private. I was scared to death. I thought that all the new students this year were so powerful. It's enough to have Chu Luiyue. Otherwise we won't be able to survive. Actually, I heard that Yi Chenjia is only 16 years old this year, but he's already a Stage 3 warrior. He should be the top among the new students. It's his first time participating in the Qing Jiao competition this year, but he directly entered the top 10. He's not inferior to Jiang Yuan at all. It's a pity that Chu Luiyue appeared in front of him, overshadowing the others. I think that even if Chu Luiyue isn't the top warrior this year, she will still be famous. Her future is limitless. With the intense battle between Chu Luiyue and Situ Ziyue as a comparison, the battle between Su Tingfeng and Yi Chenjia seemed much more ordinary. Although Yi Chenjia was talented, there was a gap between him and Su Tingfeng. After a tough battle for half an hour, he lost regretfully. Su Tingfeng cupped his hands at Yi Chenjia politely. You let me win. Yi Chenjia chuckled bitterly. It's indeed not easy. I wonder. He couldn't help but look at Tian's side. To the end, to the stage, to the stage, to the stage. The surrounding people were still discussing her battle in low voices, but there wasn't the slightest bit of pride in her eyes, as if she wasn't the one who had won. Was to the top to two. Top to the stage to the end. Yi Chenjia was ashamed of his inferiority. Su Tingfeng followed his gaze and his expression changed slightly. He rubbed his glabella with a slight headache. Originally he thought that his ranking could be higher, but it seemed like it would be difficult. The next 2 matches were very fast. In the third match, Tianlu Academy's Qin Huai challenged Nanfeng Academy's Shi Wanwan. In the fourth match, Nanfeng Academy's Li Ziyuan challenged Xiao Wenling from the same academy. The 3 people after Chu Luiyue all tried their best to challenge people with lower rankings, but they still failed. Chu Luiyue watched seriously as she adjusted her breathing. She couldn't tell who would become her opponent later on, so she had to take this chance to observe their abilities. Both Shi Wanwan and Xiao Wenling were intermediate Stage 4 warriors. Judging from the competition, they weren't as good as Situ Ziyue. This also meant that they couldn't threaten her for the time being. She turned her gaze and looked at Rong Jin. Rong Jin, who was in second place, became the last person to be chosen. His opponent was Taiyan Academy's Huan Jingchua. Huan Jingchua was in 6th place and he was already an intermediate Stage 4 warrior. If it were the previous Shi Wanwan or Xiao Wenling, they might have a chance of winning. However, Rong Jin was a peak Stage 4 warrior and he was stronger. His chances of winning weren't high. The two of them stood in the arena and faced each other. Both of them were tall and had handsome appearances. Just by standing there, they attracted the attention of many women. I didn't have the chance to fight you last year and I've always regretted it. This time it's finally perfect. Huan Jingchua chuckled. Please give me your guidance. Rong Jin nodded proudly. It's not guidance, it's just a friendly match. Although he said this, he didn't take Huan Jingchua seriously. There was a difference in abilities between the two of them. Rong Jin had seen Huan Jingchua's previous matches, and he could only be considered average. Rong Jin was aiming for first place in the warrior competition. After he defeated Huan Jingchua, he might have to challenge Chu Luiyue. Thinking of this, he felt frustrated. Let's begin. Huan Jingchua looked at Rong Jin's absent-minded appearance and smiled deeply. Please. Then he made the first move. The moment he moved, his figure disappeared from the spot. Rong Jin suddenly recovered his senses and immediately knitted his brows. How did Heng Jingchua's speed suddenly become so fast? A cold wind came from behind and Rong Jin immediately changed his direction and threw out a palm strike. Lingyun palm. The wind from his palm whistled. Just as it was about to hit Huan Jingchua's chest, he somehow moved and dodged it again. Rong Jin's palm strike missed. Looking at the smiling Huan Jingchua in the other direction, Rong Jin's heart slowly sank. This Huan Jingchua is not right. Chu Liyue, who was sitting below the stage and watching the match, suddenly sat up straight. His gaze focused as he stared at Huan Jingchua. Xiyang noticed her interest and couldn't help but ask softly, "You also think that there's something wrong with Huan Jingchua?" Even though he didn't like Rong Jin's abilities were widely acknowledged. But now Huan Jingchua easily dodged Rong Jin's attack. Chu Liyue was silent for a moment and said, "He's an advanced stage 4 warrior." "Yes, everyone knows that he's..." "Wait, you mean Huan Jingchua?" Xiyang was shocked and couldn't help but take a few more glances. "That's impossible, right? His aura is clearly similar to Jiang Yuan's. Isn't he an intermediate stage 4 warrior?" Chu Liyue didn't explain, but her expression became more serious. Xiyang wanted to say something, but he suddenly felt Huan Jingchua's aura skyrocket. In just a moment his aura wasn't any weaker than Rong Jin's. The two of them went from being one strong and one weak to being evenly matched. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. "This Huan Jingchua will be a strong opponent for me." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 226. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Peak Stage 4 Warrior? So this is Heng Jingchua's true ability? I really couldn't tell how he suppressed his cultivation level previously. I heard that some secret techniques or yuan instruments can hide one's abilities. This is going to be interesting. A battle between two peak stage 4 warriors. I thought he was the unluckiest one and could only challenge Rong Jin, but it's still unknown who will win now. The chaotic discussions entered Rong Jin's ears and his face turned even uglier. After such a long time, I didn't even realize that Heng Jingchua was hiding his abilities. Now that I think about what Heng Jingchua said, it's ridiculous. Advice. He's clearly at the same level as me, but he said that on purpose. I didn't expect you to improve so quickly in a year. He remembered that Heng Jingchua was only a beginner stage 4 warrior last year. He actually broke through to peak stage 4 warrior in such a short time. No wonder the crowd was shocked. Heng Jingchua's smile deepened. I was just lucky. I just broke through a few days ago. Rong Jin felt even more uncomfortable when he heard this. It took him almost 2 years to break through from beginner stage 4 warrior to peak stage 4 warrior. Heng Jingchua was clearly showing off. Since that's the case, let's cut the crap and see who's stronger. Rong Jin didn't want to listen to him anymore, so he circulated his force and attacked first. He only used 70% of his strength in the previous attack, but this time he used all his strength. Heng Jingchua faced it head-on. The two of them fought hand to hand. The battle quickly became a mess. Even though the two of them were at the same level, Rong Jin had broken through earlier and was stronger, so he would definitely have the upper hand. But as time passed, the crowd realized that this wasn't the case. Heng Jingchua calmly received all of Rong Jin's attacks and even seemed to be handling them with ease. On the other hand, Rong Jin gradually realized that Heng Jingchua was stronger than he thought after his consecutive losses. He originally thought that he would win this round, but it ended in a stalemate. Rong Jin's heart gradually became anxious. Looking at the situation in the arena, Sun Zhongyan gradually frowned. I remember that Heng Jingchua wasn't the best before, right? How did he improve so much in just a year? Wen Yan nodded. You're right. The reason why this person was ranked 6th was actually because he was lucky in the previous year's competition. He didn't meet any particularly strong opponents. At that time, it seemed that he was just fighting steadily and steadily. As for other things, he didn't seem to be particularly outstanding. I don't know what happened this year. Sun Zhongyan stroked his beard. Perhaps he encountered some kind of opportunity. Who knows? Wen Yan and the rest exchanged glances and saw the worry in each other's eyes. What they were most concerned about wasn't why Heng Jingchua suddenly became stronger in the past year, but whether Rong Jin could win this round. He was publicly acknowledged as one of the strongest students in Tianlu Academy. They all hoped that he would be able to get first place in the Qingjiao competition. As for himself, it was clear that he had the same thoughts. But if he lost this round, he would fall to the bottom 5. Then the best result he could achieve was only 6th place. This wasn't even as good as his 5th place last year. It was fine if other people lost, but if Rongjin lost, the entire academy would lose face. Bai Qin rolled his eyes and smiled. Elder son, actually we don't have to worry too much. No matter what, we still have little Lu Yu. I'm first now. As long as I can stabilize this position in the future, it will definitely be a great honor. Sun Zhongyan wanted to say something but stopped. He was still worried. This Heng Jingchua seems to be holding back. Unlike the stifling atmosphere at Tianlu Academy, the crowd at Taiyan Academy finally regained their spirits. Qing Han smiled in surprise. This kid hit it well. Even I didn't know that he had already broken through to become a peak stage 4 warrior. Situ Xingshan had already calmed down, so she smiled and said, Master is always busy. It's normal that he didn't notice such small things. Even though Qing Han was the director, there were many things that he didn't personally ask about. Most of his energy was actually placed on Situ Xingshan. If not, he wouldn't have the idea of letting Situ Xingshan become the top celestial physician in her first Qingjiao competition. Haha. No matter what, this kid looks like he's a talent that can be nurtured. When the Qingjiao competition ends, we have to nurture him well. The few teachers behind him nodded when they heard this. You're right, director. Qing Han looked at the stage in satisfaction. How shrewd was his judgment. He could tell with one look that Rongjin was gradually at a disadvantage. As long as nothing happened to Heng Jingchua, it was only a matter of time before he won. Even though they lost Situ Ziwa, they still had Heng Jingchua. I really want to see if Tianlu Academy's people can still be so smug when Rongjin loses. Many wounds gradually appeared on Rongjin's body. Even though they weren't serious, the blood stains on his clothes made him look especially pathetic. However, Heng Jingchua still looked like he was at ease. The contrast between the two was really stark. The crowd's voices gradually became softer as they watched this scene nervously. Heng Jingchua suddenly closed in. Rongjin was shocked and immediately retreated. However, he was injured, so how could he be faster than Heng Jingchua? The distance between the two kept shrinking. Heng Jingchua finally struck out again. Rongjin couldn't avoid it and could only brace himself to receive it. A punch flew out. Hong. The two of them crazily attacked each other. The messy ripples spread in all directions. At this point, Rongjin suddenly felt that something was amiss. A chill was spreading from Heng Jingchua's palm to his hand. At the same time, the force in his body suddenly became messy and started to drain rapidly. His heart skipped a beat and he immediately looked up. Heng Jingchua's move was very strange. It's time to end this. Heng Jingchua met his gaze and didn't avoid it. Instead, he smiled meaningfully. His voice, which had originally sounded modest and courteous, was now filled with coldness. Not good. Rongjin thought. He immediately wanted to retreat. However, Heng Jingchua was faster. His palm turned into a claw and directly grabbed Rongjin's wrist. The strength in his hand was frightening. This time, Rongjin's wrist was instantly bruised. How dare you? Before Rongjin could finish his sentence, Heng Jingchua had already grabbed his wrist and harshly flung it out. The crowd only saw Rongjin's figure uncontrollably fly out. Then he fell to the ground with a bang. The key was that he fell outside the competition venue. Out of bounds, he was eliminated. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 227. There was an uproar. Nobody expected Rongjin to be eliminated in such a manner. At this point, Situ Ziwe and Rongjin, who had the highest hopes for this year's Qingjiao competition, had both been defeated. Rongjin finally recovered his senses when he heard the commotion around him and realized that he had been pushed out of the arena. I lost. Rongjin's mind went blank. He never thought that he would lose to Heng Jingchua. He also didn't think that he would fall behind the top 5. This failure directly determined that he had no hope of surpassing last year's ranking. He supported himself with his arms and wanted to stand up, but he realized that he had no force in his body. He looked up in shock and saw that Hing Jingchua had regained his gentle and harmless smile. "Thank you for letting me win, Crown Prince Rongjin." Even though he was smiling, he stood there high and mighty. His eyes and brows were filled with mockery. It was as if he was saying, "You're just a Siso." Rongjin's heart burned like fire, causing him to lose his rationality. Once he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground again. His organs seemed to be enveloped by the cold air, which gradually spread to his entire body. His body gradually stiffened and his mind became muddled. Finally, his vision turned black and he fainted. "Go and bring him back." Sun Zhongyan immediately frowned and said. Very quickly, someone went forward and helped Rongjin up. Realizing that he had fainted, Sun Zhongyan hurriedly went forward and carefully looked at his face. His brows furrowed even more tightly. Even though he expected Hing Jingchua to win, it didn't seem to be enough to make Rongjin faint. However, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with Rongjin. He glanced at Hing Jingchua but saw that the man had already left. His expression was the same as usual. "Xianxia, come and take a look." Xianxia went forward and took Rongjin's pulse. After checking carefully, he shook his head. He was depressed previously and he fainted because of the blow today. "It's nothing serious." The crowd looked at each other and was speechless. They had actually heard a little about Rongjin being grounded by His Majesty. He could only come out because of the Qingjiao competition. He wanted to use this to make a comeback, but he didn't expect that this series of events would break him down. Sun Zhongyan nodded, feeling slightly relieved. "It's good. Bring him back first and let Zhurong take care of him." Xianxia hesitated. If that's the case, wouldn't it be the same as giving up on the competition later on? How can he fight in his current state? Besides, what's the point of continuing the competition? Sun Zhongyan sighed. As the crown prince, Rongjin was used to being arrogant. This time he was aiming for first place. Now, not to mention first place, he was not even fated to be in the top 5. If he continued to force himself to compete, it would just be a waste of time. Bai Qin coughed and whispered, "That's right. Then wouldn't Situ Ziyue be unable to continue competing?" Although Tai Yan Academy did not say anything, it was obvious that Situ Ziyue would not participate in the competition. As such, both sides were in a similar situation, so it wasn't too bad. Xianxia and the others didn't say anything else. Just like that, Rongjin was quickly taken away. When she passed by Chu Liyue, she fixed her gaze on him. That was not right. Even though Rongjin was narrow-minded, he was capable. Hing Jingchua was of the same cultivation level as him, so how could he directly knock Rongjin out? What are you looking at?" The golden mane bear cub ran out of Mu Hongyu's arms, and Mu Hongyu hurriedly chased after it. She saw that the older Chu Liyue was staring in the direction that Rongjin left in. She widened her eyes and asked in disbelief, "Are you worried about Rongjin?" Chu Liyue looked at her speechlessly. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm just worried about myself." Rongjin's behavior was really strange. There must be something wrong with that Hing Jingchua. Mu Hongyu patted her chest. "I thought so too. You're not blind. But then again, I think that Hing Jingchua is quite strong. If the two of you fight later, can you win?" Chu Liyue retracted his gaze. "We'll have to try to find out." After the first round of competition, the new rankings were out. Chu Liyue was temporarily in first place, followed by Hing Jingchua, Xiao Wenling, Shi Wanwan, and Su Tingfeng. Sun Zhongyan asked in a low voice, "The first round is over and the rankings are out. If anyone is not satisfied with their current ranking, they can continue to challenge us. If no one challenges them, their current ranking will be the final result of the Qingjiao competition." He looked around and swept his gaze across Chu Liyue and the others. "Now, whoever wants to challenge us, step forward." The entire square was silent. Everyone looked at the few people curiously, secretly guessing who would continue to compete. At this stage, no matter who competed with whom, it would be a bloodbath. However, the glory of being first was something that everyone yearned for. Chu Liyue was the center of attention. Without a doubt, her position was the most tempting. Finally, someone took a step forward and stood out. Chu Liyue seemed to sense something. She looked up and saw a smiling face. Even though that face was smiling, there was no hint of a smile in the corners of his eyes. There was only a restless ambition. Tai Yan Academy's Hing Jingchua challenges Tianlu Academy's Chu Liyue. Chapter 228. As expected, Hing Jingchua stood out and went for the first place. In an instant, almost everyone became excited. These two people were definitely the most eye-catching people in this Qingjiao competition. Chu Luiyue was young, but her fighting skills were shocking. It was easy for her to win against someone of a higher level. Hing Jingchua had improved so quickly that he was not to be underestimated. Everyone was curious about who would have the last laugh when the two of them met. Under countless gazes, Chu Luiyue stood up, smiled and nodded. Please. I didn't expect it to be the two of us fighting in the end. Hing Jingchua cupped his hands and smiled. Chu Luiyue seemed to smile. You should have expected this, right? Hing Jingchua's smile froze for a moment, but it quickly disappeared. Miss Chu, you really know how to joke. Everyone wants to win in the Qingjiao competition. However, I didn't expect to enter the finals. I also didn't expect my final opponent to be you. Chu Luiyue could not be bothered to listen to him. Hing Jingchua obviously came prepared. He purposely hid his abilities previously and only showed his true abilities when he fought with Rong Jin. She was almost certain that he had other tricks up his sleeves. Cut the crap. Let's begin, said Chu Luiyue as she took out the black Xian formation crystal. Hing Jingchua's eyelids twitched. Chu Luiyue's move was indeed difficult to deal with. Isn't it bad for little Lu Yu to use her killer move the moment she goes up? Asked Bai Qin worriedly. Sun Zhongyan smiled helplessly. What else can she do? Hing Jingchua is an advanced stage 4 warrior after all. The difference between the two of them was huge. If Chu Luiyue did not give it her all from the start, this match would end very quickly. By then she would not even have the chance to use her killer move. However, she used too much energy just now. She definitely hasn't recovered yet. It's already very impressive that she won against Situ Ziyue. Even if she loses this match, she'll be second. Besides, she's not a warrior in the academy. As long as she does her best, she won't have any regrets. Bai Qin thought about it and didn't say anything else. Buddhist Lotus Formation. With Chu Luiyue's clear shout, the first layer of petals slowly bloomed. Immediately after, the second level quickly appeared. The huge Buddhist lotus appeared once again. A powerful pressure silently spread out. Chu Luiyue had used the Buddhist Lotus Formation twice in a row, but he had almost exhausted all of his strength. However, the power of a level 4 Xian formation was enough to deal with someone at the peak of the 4th stage. As long as he could kill Hing Jingchua with one strike, he would be able to win. Hing Jingchua looked at the Buddhist lotus that was slowly blooming and his expression turned serious. He clasped his hands slightly in front of him and streams of origin power rapidly condensed. A round ball as bright as the moon gradually appeared in his palm. The sphere looked bright and hot, but in reality, it was bone-chilling cold. Streaks of white mist condensed and shrouded the surroundings. Even Hing Jingchua's hands were covered in a thin layer of frost. Both of them were accumulating their power. Then Hing Jingchua made the first move and threw the sphere in his hand forward. Moon Devour. The sphere quickly flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue activated the origin power in his body. Close. The huge petals swayed gently and then closed. Just like when he was fighting with Situ Ziyue, Hing Jingchua's sphere gradually slowed down and finally fell into the Buddhist lotus formation, completely covered by the layers of petals. In the arena, only two violent forces were left fighting each other. Although the crowd couldn't see what was happening inside, they could still feel the vibrations coming from the trembling petals. Can Chu Luiyue still win this time? The Buddhist lotus formation has swallowed Hing Jingchua's power again. I don't think it's that simple. Chu Luiyue has already fought once and now he doesn't have much energy left. The power of the Buddhist lotus formation must have weakened as well. Hing Jingchua is the same. If the Buddhist lotus formation can't stop Hing Jingchua, then Chu Luiyue will lose for sure. Chu Luiyue stared at the cluster of Buddhist lotuses. She could clearly feel that the moon devourer's power was being dissolved by the Buddhist lotus formation. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before Hing Jingchua. Bang. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the Buddhist lotus formation. The sound couldn't be heard clearly by others, but it immediately alerted Chu Luiyue. On one of the petals there was a hole that was about an inch long. The reason why there was the sound of something breaking was because there was a layer of frost on the petal. As it was inside and it was only a small area, Chu Luiyue didn't notice it previously. The layer of frost made the petal extremely weak, and it was easily broken by a force that flew out. Chu Liyue looked carefully and suddenly realized that there was a faint black color on the edge of the broken petal. Something was wrong. Chu Liyue was alarmed and she felt a strong sense of uneasiness. She didn't think and immediately retreated. At the same time she waved her wrist and threw out the crystal barrier. The transparent barrier instantly enveloped her. Almost at the same time, countless similar holes appeared on the huge Buddhist lotus. Then the Buddhist lotus suddenly broke. Countless rays of light scattered in all directions. A violent aura swept out in all directions. The round ball reappeared in everyone's sight. Compared to the beginning it looked smaller, but its power was still there. When the Buddhist lotus broke, it quickly flew toward Chu Liyue. The crowd exclaimed, "Chu Liyue's Buddhist lotus formation has been broken." This time Heng Jingchua is definitely going to win. The difference in strength is indeed difficult to overcome. Looking at the situation, Cheng Han's lips curled up. Jingchua's abilities have indeed improved a lot. He can even break through a 4th-level Xian formation. Xianxia, even though your brother is injured now that Jingchua has stepped in and won first place, it can be considered as helping Ziyue and the entire academy regain face. Situ Xianxia nodded. I wonder if Heng Jingchua can deal with Chu Liyue like how he dealt with Rong Jin. In this competition nobody was allowed to kill, but it was still possible to injure someone severely. Since Heng Jingchua wants to be first, he must have used all his strength against Chu Liyue. Thinking of this, Situ Xianxia finally felt a little better. As for the crystal barrier, it won't be too late to ask about it after all this is over. Chu Liyue looked up at the round, moon-like ball that was rapidly approaching her. The tyrannical power struck the glazed barrier, causing it to retreat. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly jumped. Even if the crystal barrier can protect me, I'll still fail if I go out like this. She made up her mind and suddenly jumped out of the crystal barrier. She wanted to avoid that attack. However, at this moment she suddenly saw that within the sphere, there seemed to be a faintly discernible mass of black. The sinister and cold aura made one shudder. Her heart skipped a beat. Heng Jingchua actually. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 229. Just as Chu Liyue was about to speak, Heng Jingchua seemed to have sensed something. A cold light flashed in his eyes and he quickly rushed toward Chu Liyue. He was extremely fast and in the blink of an eye he was in front of Chu Liyue. Without hesitation he shot out another ray of force. The force merged with the ball and the power that had been reduced increased again. It also approached Chu Liyue at an even faster speed. A terrifying pressure came crushing over. Chu Liyue felt as if her chest was being crushed by a huge rock. Even breathing became difficult, let alone speaking. Her face became even paler. She was about to be hit by the moon devourer. It's over. Chu Liyue is going to lose. Why did she suddenly come out of the crystal barrier? He's hiding inside. She can't just stay inside. Heng Jingchua is so strong. He can definitely push her and the crystal barrier out of the arena. But this time she really can't turn the situation around. Almost everyone was watching this scene nervously. Some were already shaking their heads in pity, as if they had already predicted the final outcome. However, at this moment, a red figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue felt an itch on her cheek. She looked over and realized that the blood ferret had come out. And it was blocking in front of her. Dumpling, come back. Chu Liyue was anxious. She gritted her teeth and shouted. Blood was already flowing out of the corner of her mouth. If she could rush to the front at this time, she would be able to see that Tuanzi's eyes were burning with anger. Its fur was already standing up and it was obviously going to rush forward. Heng Jingchua narrowed his eyes and looked at the red furry thing that suddenly appeared in front of him. Blood ferret? Seeing that the blood ferret was full of hostility, he finally couldn't help but laugh. Chu Liyue, is this your magical beast? Could it be that he was joking? Although the blood ferret was a 3rd-grade magical beast, it had almost no combat ability. Normally it could be played with as a pet, but in a battle like this, it would be of no help to its owner. He had thought that Chu Liyue was very powerful, but now it seemed that she was just a little girl with an immature mind. She didn't even have a magical beast. This blood ferret was most likely raised by her for fun, wasn't it? What a joke. Hearing his words, the hostility in Dumpling's eyes intensified. Mocking Chu Liwei was mocking the blood ferret. The next moment its small, seven eyes. Speed was extremely fast. Everyone could only see it drawing a red arc in the air. It was actually heading straight for the moon devourer. Heng twos to the end. A mantis is a mantis to stop. The power of the moon devourer was extremely powerful. This time, it was likely that it would directly take the blood ferret's life. Kill to kill it. Chu Liwei wanted to stop it, but she couldn't say a complete word because of the pressure. Dumpling was too impulsive. Inside the moon devourer's ball was roar. Tuanzi directly pounced on the ball that was emitting a terrible power. Chu Liwei was stunned. That's not right. She was already out of breath from the pressure and the blood in her body was in turmoil. How could Dumpling just rush over? How did it get over? Before she could figure it out, something even more shocking happened. Dumpling opened its mouth and bit down. Crack. A crisp sound was heard. Dumpling had bitten a hole in the ball. Its cheeks were puffed up and its head was almost as big as half its body. Crack. Crack. Gulp. Along with this series of sounds, Tuanzi actually chewed and swallowed the piece of meat that it had bitten off. The huge square was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Almost everyone's eyes widened as they looked at the scene in disbelief. Even Chu Liue's eyes twitched. What just happened? Dumpling ate that thing. Ate it. Although it looked like a glass crystal, it wasn't. It was full of condensed force. Heng Jingchua was stunned. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate this move. Ever since he succeeded, he had always kept it as his trump card. Once he used it, he would never lose. Something like this had never happened before. While everyone was still in a daze, Dumpling opened its mouth again and bit off another big piece. The gap on the ball was even bigger now. As it moved, the force on the ball began to deplete rapidly. Soon it had swallowed half of the ball. Heng Jingchua started to feel uneasy. It couldn't go on like this. He didn't have time to think about what was going on with the blood ferret. He had to stop it. Or else he quickly went forward. However, just as he moved, he realized that the blood ferret had grabbed the remaining half of the ball and ran away. As it ran, it ate the ball at an even faster speed. Crack. Crack. Heng Jingchua almost went crazy when he heard the sound. His origin power was contained in it. If it was swallowed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to recover. However, he soon realized that his speed was not as fast as the blood ferret's. Thus he could only watch as the sphere became smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until, gulp, Dumpling stuffed the last bit into its mouth and swallowed it. Heng Jingchua's movements suddenly froze and his body trembled slightly. It was gone. His force was gone just like that. Dumpling, are you okay? Chu Liwei finally recovered. She quickly went forward and looked at it nervously. Dumpling's eyes were wide open, and its body was swaying as if it couldn't stand properly. Chu Liwei was even more worried. I told you not to, burp. Dumpling suddenly let out a loud burp. Chu Liwei was speechless. Why did it look like it was drunk? Before she could react, Dumpling had already turned around and looked at Heng Jingchua. Puff. It suddenly spat out a black ball that flew toward Heng Jingchua. Heng Jingchua widened his eyes in shock. It actually spat out that thing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 230. Heng Jingchua retreated without hesitation, trying to avoid that thing. However, Dumpling had eaten a ball of force and her blood was boiling. She moved too quickly and Heng Jingchua had no time to dodge. In a moment of desperation, he raised his arm in an attempt to block it. Puchi. Everyone saw a small black ball spit out from the blood ferret's mouth, and it pierced through Heng Jingchua's forearm. Red blood splattered everywhere. A bloody hole appeared on Heng Jingchua's arm. Ah! Heng Jingchua's face turned pale from the intense pain. However, compared to the pain, there was more fear on his face. He raised his injured arm with his other hand, and his whole body was trembling violently from fear. No. That thing could not be touched. A cold chill was spreading from the wound. Heng Jingchua's face was ashen. Then he took out a flying knife and stabbed it into the wound, gouging it out viciously. A piece of flesh fell off. When everyone saw this scene, their hearts were filled with horror. Heng Jingchua had gouged out a piece of flesh from his arm. What is he doing? Qing Han stood up abruptly, but he saw that Heng Jingchua did not stop. Instead, he continued to gouge out the flesh around the wound. One piece after another, and some were even attached to the skin. It looked extremely bloody and cruel. If it were anyone else, they would not be able to withstand such pain. However, Heng Jingchua seemed to have gone crazy and he did not stop. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the flesh on his arm had been gouged out, and the white bones were clearly visible. Jingchua, stop right now. However, Heng Jingchua did not seem to hear him at all. His body was trembling as if he was going to gouge out the flesh from his entire arm. Some of the more cowardly people had already covered their eyes, unable to bear to watch. Even if it was a one-hit kill, it would still be more satisfying than this. His actions were even scarier than killing someone. It sent chills down everyone's spine. Qing Han looked at Chu Liwei furiously and shouted in a low voice, "Chu Liwei, what the hell is going on? What did you do to Jingchua?" Chu Liwei spat out a mouthful of blood and raised his hand to wipe off the bloodstain on his lips. She felt the chaotic aura in her body gradually calm down. Only then did she look at Qing Han unhurriedly. There was a mocking smile on her lips, and there seemed to be ice condensing in her eyes. "Director Qing Han, you should ask King Jingchua himself. He knew very well what he had done." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Qing Han pointed at Chu Liwei with an ugly expression. "Jingchua is in this state because of you. Everyone can see it. You actually want to make a false countercharge. If you don't give me a satisfactory explanation for what happened today, don't even think about leaving." Hearing this, Sun Zhongyan laughed indifferently, but the pressure on his body gradually increased. "Brother Qing Han, why can't we talk things over nicely? Why are you threatening the child?" Qing Han took a deep breath, but when he saw that Heng Jingchua had no intention of stopping, he could not suppress the anger in his heart. "Sun Zhongyan, are you trying to cover up for Chu Liwei?" Sun Zhongyan's smile faded a little. "Lu Yu is a student of Tianlu Academy. How can I let others bully him? Qing Han, you're an elder. Before this matter is investigated, it's best that you don't speak nonsense." "Are you threatening me?" "I wouldn't dare. I'm just stating the facts." The two of them went back and forth and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Chu Liwei hugged Dumpling in her arms. However, she saw it staring at her with a pair of dazed eyes. It tilted its head and rubbed against her palm eagerly and affectionately, as if it did not realize what earth-shattering thing it had just done. Her heart warmed. If it were not for Dumpling, she would have been in danger today. After patting Dumpling, Chu Liwei looked at the two of them. "Elder son, this matter was caused by the student. Let the student settle it himself." Sun Zhongyan looked at her hesitantly. With Qing Han acting like this, he definitely wouldn't take things lying down. How was she going to deal with this? "All right. However, don't worry. The academy will definitely not let its students suffer." Chu Liwei nodded. "Thank you, Elder Sunday." Qing Han waved his sleeves fiercely. "I'd like to see what kind of explanation you can give." Chu Liwei did not immediately answer his question. Instead, she walked toward Heng Jingchua. Heng Jingchua's attention was all on his arm at this moment. He turned a deaf ear to everything else. He did not even realize that Chu Liwei had walked in front of him. In fact, even if he knew, he could not care less. Chu Liwei looked at him calmly, and her gaze quickly brushed past his bloody arm. She looked like she was smiling but not at the same time. "Ah, it's already stained with blood. Then, even if you cut off your entire arm, it doesn't seem to be of any use." Hearing this, Heng Jingchua's movements suddenly froze. A look of despair appeared in his eyes. How could he not know this? He was just holding on to his last hope. Bang. While he was in a daze, Chu Liwei suddenly lifted her long leg and kicked him hard. Heng Jingchua was not prepared. At this moment he had no intention to fight. He was directly kicked out by Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei used all her strength this time. The two of them were not far from the edge of the arena. Heng Jingchua flew out and directly out of the arena. Then he fell hard onto the ground. His body left a deep trail of blood on the ground, which made him look particularly pitiful. "Chu Liwei!" Qing Han shouted angrily. "What are you doing?" Chu Liwei's eyes curved. She smiled very politely. "Oh, nothing. I just thought that since we're already at this stage, it's just right to end this competition first. After all, she still wanted to win. Qing Han's chest felt like it was being burned by a ball of fire. He almost could not control himself and went forward to teach Chu Liwei a lesson himself. Chu Liwei seemed to have predicted what he was going to do. She spoke first. Director Qing Han, don't you want to know why Hing Jingchua suddenly became like this? Please take a look again. Qing Han turned his head to look. Hing Jingchua fell down from the arena. However, he still seemed to be immersed in that strange state. He did not have time to get up from the ground. The first thing he did was to pick up the flying dagger that was thrown to the side. He gritted his teeth. As if he had made a huge decision, he slashed the dagger at his own shoulder. Looked like he was going to cut off his entire arm. Qing Han lifted his finger. A ray of force flew out and knocked the flying dagger out of his hand. If he lost this arm, Hing Jingchua's future path of cultivation would be filled with difficulties. However, Hing Jingchua hurriedly picked up the flying dagger. It looked like he was going to continue. Chu Liuyue's lips curled slightly. Her tone was cold. Once the 7 coldness poison comes into contact with blood, it will quickly seep into the limbs and bones. Although you seem to be helping him by stopping him like this, in reality, it's equivalent to forcing him onto the path of no return. Chapter 231. 7 Coldness Poison. Many people's expressions changed when they heard the name. Qing Han was stunned for a moment. 7 Coldness Poison was highly toxic. Once exposed, it would spread throughout the body. After 7 days, the person would freeze to death. Could it be that Hing Jingchua was poisoned by the 7 Coldness Poison? He quickly walked towards Hing Jingchua. When he got closer, he saw that there was indeed a thin layer of black frost on his arm. On top of the badly mutilated wound, it looked especially strange. Qing Han's heart skipped a beat. Hing Jingchua had such a big wound on his body. The 7 coldness poison must have already entered his lungs and could not be saved. He was completely done for. Qing Han looked at Chu Liwei furiously. Chu Liwei, you are really vicious. How dare you poison someone in the Qingjiao competition? Chu Liwei sneered. Dean Qing Han, you should take a closer look. This 7 coldness poison was obviously brought by Hing Jingchua himself. When he attacked just now, he put the 7 coldness poison in the Moon Devourer. He wanted to kill me without anyone noticing. He did not expect my fiend to see through his plan and turn the tables on him. He is just reaping what he sowed. How can he blame me? She glanced at Hing Jingchua coldly. I haven't held him accountable for trying to kill me. You're lying. Qing Han immediately recalled that the blood ferret had indeed spat out a ball of black stuff that injured Hing Jingchua. Now that he thought about it, it must be the 7 coldness poison. That thing was obviously spat out from your fiend's mouth. It must be you, Dean Qing Han, you're so forgetful. Don't you remember that my fiend spat out that thing after swallowing the ball of Moon Devour? Chu Liwei patted Dumpling and said slowly. Just as you said earlier, everyone saw it clearly. Qing Han was speechless. In fact, he had already realized that something was wrong and was starting to feel guilty. However, how could he admit it at this moment? If he admitted it, not only would Hing Jingchua, but he and the entire Taiyan Academy would also be humiliated. They would become the laughing stock of everyone. It was a taboo to use poison in the Qingjiao competition. Sun Zhongyan quickly stepped forward and took a closer look at Hing Jingchua. His expression turned cold. Although I'm not a celestial physician, I can still recognize 7 coldness poison. Qing Han, you better give everyone an explanation for this matter. Qing Han's face turned pale and for a moment he didn't know how to refute. At this moment Hing Jingchua had already chopped off his arm. Blood splattered everywhere. He let out an extremely miserable shriek that made one's heart tremble. The square was completely silent. Even those who didn't know what the 7 coldness poison was couldn't help but feel fear when they saw this scene. They didn't dare to say a word. Amidst this awkward and tense silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Miss Chu, you keep saying that Jingchua brought the 7 colds poison himself. But do you have any evidence? Chu Liwei narrowed his eyes. Why is this Situ Xingqian so dramatic? What has this matter got to do with her? Situ Xingqian stepped forward and said, Although your blood ferret spat out the 7 coldness poison after it swallowed the moon devourer, there's no 7 coldness poison in it. What if the 7 coldness poison wasn't in the moon devourer and the blood ferret brought it with him? A strange light flashed across her eyes. If there's really no problem between you and the blood ferret, why did you leave the crystal barrier despite knowing that the moon devourer was powerful? Eldest Princess Situ, your question is interesting. I'm clearly the one who was harmed, but you want me to prove my innocence? Chu Luiyue knitted his brows. Situ Xianxia calmly said, Jing Chua is powerful. Jing Chua is very powerful. He is more than 1 level higher than you. He can win against you no matter how he fights. Why would he use such a despicable method? Chu Luiyue laughed out loud when she heard this. It seems like eldest Princess Situ doesn't want to admit that I won against Situ Ziyue earlier. If I didn't see wrongly, he's still resting behind you. It's hard for him to even stand up. Situ Xianxia's expression changed slightly. It's fine to talk about other things, but Chu Luiyue is clearly humiliating me on purpose when he talks about my brother. That's just, since I can win against Situ Ziyue, why can't I win against Hing Jingchua? As for why he used such a method when he's so strong, only he knows. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly and he revealed a meaningful smile. After all, he even did something to Rong Jin. Once the sentence came out, it was no different from a clap of thunder. After being dazed for a while, everyone was in an uproar. Chu Luiyue's words clearly meant, Luyu, is what you said true? Asked Sun Zhongyan anxiously with tightly knitted brows. He was also poisoned. If you don't believe me, you can go and check. Oh, Director Qing Han and eldest Princess Situ should also take a look in case you say that we did something in secret. Chu Luiyue generously lifted his chin. He's still over there. Sun Zhongyan and the rest hurriedly walked over. Zhuo Rong, who was looking after Rong Jin, was confused. 7 coldness poison? I didn't notice it. Xian Tsong rushed over first and grabbed Rong Jin's wrist again as his expression became increasingly solemn. He had already checked Rong Jin's pulse once, but he didn't find anything. It was the same this time. What did Chu Luiyue say? He turned around hesitantly. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly asked, How is it? Xian Tsong and Zhuo Rong fell silent. Sun Zhongyan's heart sank. At this point, Qing Han had already walked over. He glanced at the unconscious Rong Jin and coldly shouted, Why are you still here? Isn't he fine? How is he poisoned? Chu Luiyue, even if you're lying, you can't say something that can't be exposed so easily, right? What else do you have to say now? Chu Luiyue looked at Zhuo Rong. Teacher Zhuo Rong, please cut Rong Jin's finger. Zhuo Rong didn't know what was going on, but he still did as he was told. A silver light flashed and a wound appeared on Rong Jin's finger. Red blood quickly seeped out. But soon the blood droplet quickly condensed and was covered with a thin layer of black frost. Zhuo Rong was shocked. It's indeed 7 coldness poison. Everyone was shocked. Qing Han's words were stuck in his throat. Xian Tsong went closer and carefully checked before saying, It's indeed 7 coldness poison. It's definitely 7 coldness poison. It's just that the dosage is very small, so it can't be seen from the outside. As he spoke, guilt and self-blame grew in his heart. We actually didn't notice it earlier. If we let the 7 coldness poison spread, Rong Jin would have died. Zhuo Rong hurriedly took out a pill and fed it to Rong Jin. Even though it couldn't cure the poison, it could temporarily suppress it. Even Sun Zhongyan was a little scared. Rong Jin was the crown prince after all. If something really happened to him, the academy couldn't escape the blame. Chu Luiyue looked at Qing Han and Situ Xianxia. The person who fought with Rong Jin just now was Hing Jingchua. Could it be that the 7 colds poison in his body was also sent by me through the air? Love Network has a much better reading experience. Chapter 232. Qing Han was speechless. The 7 coldness poison in Rong Jin's body was the best evidence. Even if he wanted to refute, he could not think of a single word at this point. He only felt embarrassed. This was even more so for Situ Xianxia. Previously, she was the one who suspected Chu Luiyue, and she was also the one who asked Chu Luiyue to take out the evidence. Now everything was clear. Countless pairs of eyes landed on her, making her feel uneasy. So Rong Jin was poisoned too. This must be Heng Jingchua's doing. Yeah. Chu Luiyue never interacted with Rong Jin from the start to the end. How could it be her? I knew it. Rong Jin and Heng Jingchua are clearly of the same level, so how could Heng Jingchua win so easily? It turns out that he used such despicable means. I think that he might not have won the previous competitions with his true abilities. I really don't know how Taiyan Academy teaches people to do such a thing. Also, Situ Xingqian has been speaking up for her academy's people from the start. Heng Jingchua clearly did something wrong, but she's suspicious. Rumors say that she's understanding, generous, and smart. Why can't I tell? Hey, it's just a rumor. You'll only know if it's true when you see it. Don't you think that she seems to be targeting Chu Luiyue? Could it be that Chu Luiyue offended her because he argued with her the day before? That's hard to say. After all, she's the high and mighty eldest princess. All sorts of discussions were like sharp knives that harshly pierced her body, making her feel extremely embarrassed and in pain. Situ Xingqian had been pampered since she was young. Even her father had never flared up at her. When had she ever been criticized like this? Situ Xingqian felt her face burning and she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Cheng Han, your student used such despicable means to win in the Qingjiao competition. Don't you have an explanation? Said Sun Zhongyan coldly with a solemn expression. That's right. The nature of this matter is very bad. We can't let it go just like that. Fu Yunshan, who had been sitting at the side and watching the competition, finally expressed his stance with an equally solemn expression. Previously, someone from Nanfeng Academy had also fought with Heng Jingchua. Besides, who knew if there was anyone else besides Heng Jingchua who was doing this? The two of them interrogated Cheng Han, causing him to feel extremely embarrassed. I don't know about this either. You are the dean and he is a student of your academy. Whether you know it or not, you have to take responsibility for this matter, right? Sun Zhongyan interrupted him. Cheng Han felt extremely sullen in his heart. He really didn't know. If he had known, he would never have let Heng Jingchua come. Furthermore, he wouldn't speak up for him. Just now he thought that Taiyan Academy would still be the #1 warrior this year. However, in the blink of an eye, not only did they lose the #1 spot, but they even became the target of public criticism. In a moment of desperation, he could only look at Heng Jingchua and scold him. Speak. Where did you get this from? The 7 colds poison was not a poison that ordinary people could obtain. Heng Jingchua didn't come from a prestigious family and had always kept a low profile in school. This 7 coldness poison really came out of nowhere. However, Heng Jingchua ignored Cheng Han. He just lay on the ground, curled up into a ball and trembled all over. Speak. Cheng Han wanted to walk over and kick him, but he remembered that he had the 7 coldness poison in his body and stopped in his tracks. Heng Jingchua still didn't respond. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. He suddenly thought of something and walked over to Heng Jingchua. Luiyue, be careful. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly shouted. Chu Luiyue shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He took a few more steps forward and took a closer look. When he took a look, his expression changed slightly. He's dying. What? Everyone was shocked. Sun Zhongyan and Fu Yunshan immediately went forward. They saw that Heng Jingchua's broken arm had already frozen, and it had even spread to his entire face. The poison had taken effect. At this stage there was only death for him. He would die soon and there was no way to save him. Why did the poison take effect so quickly? Fu Yunshan frowned and asked. There should still be poison in his body. It was triggered by the 7 coldness poison, so Sun Zhongyan's words cast a shadow over everyone's hearts. If that was the case, it proved that Heng Jingchua was under someone's orders. But in his current state they would definitely not be able to find out who was behind this. Fu Yunshan was a little anxious. Is there no way to save his life first? Once we find out. Before he could finish, Heng Jingchua's body suddenly trembled violently. He let out a painful whimper between his lips and teeth. It was like a cry of despair in the dark night. It sent chills down everyone's spines. Soon his movements gradually quieted down. Finally there was no more sound. Fu Yunshan and Sun Zhongyan looked at each other, their eyes filled with worry. Chu Luiyue had already accepted this fact. He gently comforted Dumpling, who was in his arms, and fell into deep thought. No wonder Heng Jingchua was so flustered when he was injured. He was not only worried about the 7 coldness poison, but he was also worried that it would trigger the other poisons in his body. The other poisons must be something that the person behind him used to control him. In the end, he was just a pawn. But who was the person behind him? There was no need for that person to come in first place in the Qingjiao competition. What was the reason? Fu Yunshan thought for a while and said, although he's already dead, if we can find out what the poison in his body is, we might be able to gain something. Qing Han, you won't object to this, right? What could Qing Han say? He could only agree. Since things have already come to this, we should naturally discuss this together. We can also use this opportunity to clear Tai Yan Academy's name. He did not want his reputation to be tarnished because of Hing Jingchua. However, at that moment, a black fog suddenly emerged from Hing Jingchua's body. Cold, sinister. Chu Lue felt a strong sense of uneasiness. In the next moment, the black fog quickly spread and enveloped Hing Jingchua completely. Then his body started to corrode at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, his corpse transformed into a pool of blood on the ground and completely disappeared. The black fog also dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Only the messy bloodstains on the ground were left, indicating what had just happened. Digression. I went out for a day yesterday and accidentally fell asleep at night. Today's update will be updated at around midnight. I did not update on time, so I owe you one. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 233. No one had expected things to turn out this way. Now there were no clues at all. They could not find anything at all. Qing Han wanted to get to the bottom of this matter more than anyone else. Now that things had turned out this way, it was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Let's put this matter aside for now. After the Qingjiao competition ends, we'll start investigating immediately. Sun Zhongyan said in a low voice. With such a thing happening, their hearts were filled with worry. However, it was obvious that the other party was meticulous and ruthless. It was definitely not something they could find out in a day or two. The Qingjiao competition had to continue. Fu Yunshan glanced at Qing Han as if he was looking at a joke. At this moment, the people from Tai Yan Academy were probably the ones who felt the most heartbroken. They did not know that such a huge scourge was hiding in the academy. Now that they thought about it, they felt extremely disgusted. All right. Hing Jingchua is a student of Tai Yan Academy after all. I think we should let Brother Qing Han handle this matter. We'll assist you. How about that? Qing Han almost could not maintain his composure anymore. Whatever you say, it's the truth. Then he turned around and returned to his seat. It was obvious that he did not want to speak anymore. Even so, he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. If he did not get to the bottom of this, he and the entire Tai Yan Academy would not be able to clear their names. Not only did he not get first place, but he also got himself into trouble. What was this? Chu Liwei put away her thoughts and smiled at Xiao Wenling and the rest. Oh right, according to the rules, you guys can continue to challenge me? Xiao Wenling and the rest, who were suddenly called out, shuddered and quickly shook their heads. No. I'm not challenging you. I'm not challenging you either. I'm injured. I'm not going to compete. I think my ranking is quite good. Chu Luiwei raised her brows. It was fine if they did not want to challenge her. Why did they make it seem like she was some demon? Looking at them, those who did not know would think that she was very scary. However, she did not know that she was indeed a very terrifying existence in their eyes. No, it should be said that most of the people in the square thought so. The scene of her blood ferret swallowing Heng Jingchua's moon devourer was still deeply imprinted in everyone's minds, and they couldn't forget it. At this time, who would be so reckless as to challenge Chu Liyue? What if the blood ferret bit his neck? Are you sure you don't want to continue? No. Several people denied in unison. Chu Liyue's red lips curved into a brilliant smile. If that's the case, elder son, is the warrior competition over? Only then did Sun Zhongyan regain his senses. That's right. If no one challenged him, then Chu Liyue would be the true #1 warrior. His originally worried mood immediately lightened up, and the wrinkles on his face bloomed into a smile. I declare, the champion of this year's Qingjiao competition is Tianlu Academy's Chu Liyue. Heng Jingchua aside, Chu Luiyue winning first place still made everyone from the Tianlu Academy celebrate. One had to know that they had not won first place for 3 whole years. With such a powerful genius, they naturally basked in the glory. Nanfeng Academy was still alright, but Taiyan Academy was utterly humiliated. They were full of confidence when they came, but who knew that things would turn out like this? Qing Han took a deep breath and kept persuading himself. Being number 1 in the warrior competition is not a big deal. There are still Xian Masters and Celestial Physician after them. The 3 Xian Master Academies are considered to be on par. No one knows who will win in the end. However, I still have Situ Xingqian. As long as I can become number 1 in the Celestial Physician competition, I can redeem myself. Lu Yu, after the Qingjiao competition ends, you can choose from any of the 3 academies and enter their library. You can borrow books for free for a month. Have you thought of which academy you want to go to? Asked Sun Zhongyan cheerfully. Chu Luiyue thought for a while and smiled. I haven't thought about it yet. Sun Zhongyan did not mind. Then think about it again. The Qingjiao competition will end in 2 days. It's the same for your selection. Nobody expected this girl to win first place, so it was normal for her to not think about it. Chu Luiyue obediently agreed and returned to her seat. Xiang was dazed. You actually won first place, Lu Yu. Are you still going to participate in the Xian Master competition? Why not? Asked Chu Luiyue. I'm sitting in the Xian Master seat. Xiang said sincerely, you've already won first place. You've already gotten first place in the warrior tournament and defeated so many people. You don't have to worry about us, do you? Chu Luiyue stared at him intently. Didn't you say that the Qingjiao competition's rewards are very generous? Xiang covered his face in despair. It's all my fault for saying that. The 3rd day of the competition ended just like that. The news of Chu Luiyue winning first place quickly spread throughout the imperial city. At the same time, many people also knew that Heng Jingchua had poisoned her. At night at Crown Prince Mansion, Rong Jin lay on the bed with a pale face. Chu Xianmin was carefully serving him in front of the bed. However, her gaze was somewhat erratic. In actual fact, she was listening to Zhou Rong and the Empress talking outside the screen. It's our negligence that caused His Highness to be poisoned. Luckily, the dosage was small and His Highness had always been strong, so it wasn't very serious. Now that the remaining poison has been removed, he just needs to rest for a while and he'll be fine. This was Zhou Rong's voice. In the academy he was the teacher and Rong Jin was the student. However, this was Crown Prince Mansion, so they naturally had to follow the hierarchy. Teacher Zhou Rong, you're too polite. If it weren't for you, the Crown Prince would have. The Empress immediately rushed over when she heard the news. Even though Zhou Rong said that Rong Jin was fine, she still felt scared. Zhou Rong sighed. Actually, the person you should thank isn't me but Lu Yu. If she didn't discover it early, we wouldn't have known that His Highness was poisoned. Once the time was delayed, it would be really dangerous. The Empress paused. Chu Luiyue. Yes. The Empress was silent for a while before she softly said, she's a good girl. She's a good child. Don't worry, when there's an opportunity, Ben Gong will personally go and thank her. Chu Xianmin unconsciously clenched her fists. Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue again. Now even the Empress said that. Water. A weak moan was heard. Chu Xianmin hurriedly looked at the bed and saw that Rong Jin had opened his eyes. Your Highness. Your Highness, you're awake? That's great. Water is here. Chu Xianmin hurriedly passed the water beside her over and carefully fed him. The people outside heard the commotion and hurriedly came in. When the Empress saw that Rong Jin was awake, her eyes turned red and she directly pounced on him. Jin, you're finally awake. Chu Xianmin hurriedly retreated, but the Empress didn't even look at her. She couldn't help but secretly bite her lips. Rong Jin opened his eyes and asked with difficulty. Did Luiyue save me? You can find a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 234. The Empress didn't expect Rong Jin's first sentence to be this. Her face darkened and Chu Xianmin even lowered her head to hide all the emotions in her eyes. The Empress patted Rong Jin's arm. Jin, you just woke up and your body is still very weak. Let's talk about this later. Rong Jin was a little dazed. Actually, he had already woken up and heard most of what Mr. Zhou Xian and his mother said. Even though he didn't remember what exactly happened, he clearly heard the key words. Heng Jingchao's 7 cold poison Chu Liu. Looking at his mother's reaction, it meant that what they said was true. Rong Jin's heart was instantly filled with mixed feelings. He felt very embarrassed when he was rejected when he invited Chu Liu. However, he didn't expect Chu Liu to help him at the crucial moment. If it weren't for her, his life would have been. The young girl's cold appearance appeared in front of him again. For some reason, the anger from being offended had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an indescribable, complicated feeling. She was indeed different from the others. He couldn't help but tightly grab the Empress's arm and anxiously said, "Mother, I have a request. Mother Empress, I have a request. I hope you will grant it." The Empress was shocked. Rong Jin had been the crown prince for many years, and he rarely used such a pleading tone to speak to her. After all, he was her son and her heart ached for him. Her voice was much gentler. "Jin, there's no need to ask for anything between us. Whatever you want to do, just say the word." Rong Jin looked at her and said word by word, "I want to marry Chu Liu as my crown princess." The Empress's smile froze. Chu Xianmin hurriedly looked up, but she immediately looked down. However, she had already secretly grabbed her sleeves and tightly clenched them. The Empress's voice was cold. "Jin, you still have a fever and your mind isn't very clear. Let's talk about it after you recover." She then stood up to leave. However, Rong Jin was very persistent. "Mother, I've made up my mind. If you don't agree, I'll go and beg father." "You're crazy." The Empress finally couldn't hold it in and suddenly raised her voice. "Don't forget your identity. You're the crown prince." As the crown prince, how could he go back on his words? Previously, Chu Liu was a good-for-nothing. Although he was criticized for canceling the engagement with her, it was more or less reasonable. How could the crown prince's consort be a good-for-nothing? But now, Rong Jin actually said that he wanted to remarry Chu Liu? What would others think? What would His Majesty think? That's absurd. However, Rong Jin didn't seem to listen to her at all as he clenched his teeth. "I only love her. If I can't marry her, then I won't marry anyone else." The Empress almost fainted from anger. What's so good about that Chu Liu? There are so many good girls in the world. Why is Rong Jin so obsessed with me all of a sudden? What exactly did I feed Rong Jin? However, seeing Rong Jin's resolute attitude, the Empress didn't dare to insist. "Allow me to think about this matter again. At the very least, we have to wait until the Qingjiao competition ends." Rong Jin also knew that it was a little overboard to suddenly raise this request, so he didn't force it. Seeing that the Empress had softened her stance, he stopped while he was ahead. "Then I'll thank you first, Mother." The Empress looked at him deeply before she turned around and left. Her thin brows were knitted together. Zhou Xian was forced to listen to this conversation at the side, and he was also very embarrassed. He found an excuse and left. Very quickly, only Rong Jin and Chu Xianmin were left in the room. Rong Jin lay back on the bed and looked at the curtains above his head in a daze. However, things related to Chu Liu kept appearing in his mind. Thinking about it carefully, even though their engagement had lasted for many years, the two of them didn't have much interaction. Now that he wanted to think about it, he realized that it was the same thing over and over again. Rong Jin was a little disappointed. However, once he thought about how Chu Liu saved his life, he felt a little happy. As long as she wasn't engaged, nobody in the imperial city could fight with him for her. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Xianmin at the side and hurriedly asked, "Oh, right. Minmin, weren't you very close to Lu Yu in the past? You should know what she likes, right? What kind of jewelry does she like? What does she usually like to do? Hurry up and tell me." Chu Xianmin almost sneered out loud. What a joke. The crown prince who used to avoid Chu Liu like the plague actually wants to remarry. He even started to ask me what Chu Liu likes. I've never had such thoughts about her. I really didn't consider her at all when I asked all these questions. Chu Xianmin suppressed the jealousy and anger in her heart and lightly said, "Your Highness, you should take care of your body first. I'll naturally tell you all these things one by one." Rong Jin was then relieved. He mumbled for a while before he fell into a deep sleep. Chu Xianmin looked at him coldly. After a while, she revealed a sarcastic smile. Chu Liu directly returned to her residence. When she went up to the second floor, she almost habitually walked to the window and looked at Yifeng courtyard. Many leaves had fallen in the courtyard and there was no one on the rattan chair. It looked a little cold. It seems like Xiao hasn't returned yet. She slightly knitted her brows and hid the faint disappointment in her heart. Thinking about it carefully, Xiao had only left for 3 days. She actually felt a little unaccustomed to it. This feeling of being tied down by something was really not good. Chu Liyue stood quietly for a while and planned to close the window. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the night sky. Chu Liyue seemed to have sensed something. She looked over and slightly widened her eyes. Shui. Plop. Shui actually directly jumped in through the window. It jumped into Chu Liyue's arms. Chu Liyue staggered a few steps and almost fell to the ground. Shui, why are you? Before she could finish speaking, she smelled a strong smell of blood. Chu Liyue's expression suddenly changed, and she hurriedly helped Shui up from her arms. Under the moonlight, she saw that there was a deep wound on Shui's body. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. What's wrong? Who did this to you? Chu Liyue's heart was burning with anger as she asked anxiously. No wonder Shui rushed in and directly pounced on her. It wasn't affectionate acting coquettishly, but because it was too injured and couldn't control itself. Shui's aura was also much weaker. It looked very messy, as if it had just gone through a fierce battle. Hearing Chu Liyue's voice, Shui let out a low whimper. A pair of ice-blue eyes looked at her sadly and nervously. Chu Liyue suddenly thought of something. Where's your master? Shui bit the corner of her clothes and pulled her outside. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Something happened to Xiao. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 235. Where is he? Chu Liyue asked immediately. Shui whimpered and lowered its body. Chu Liyue immediately understood that Shui wanted to bring her there. But, your injury, Shui shook its head and looked at her blankly. Chu Liyue calmed down and suddenly took out a herb from her heaven and earth bag. This is a spirit herb. It can stop bleeding and heal wounds. You can use it first. As she spoke, she quickly crushed the herb and applied it on Shui's wound. The wound, which was so deep that the bones could be seen, began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chu Liyue was finally relieved and sat on Shui's back. She felt a weight on her shoulder and turned to see that Dumpling had followed her. Let's go. Chu Liyue patted Shui's head lightly and Shui leaped out of the window. In the night, the figures of a human and 2 beasts rushed out quickly. When they passed through the barrier of the academy, Chu Liyue was a little worried, but Shui did not seem to care. When they got close to the barrier, a silver glow suddenly spread out from Shui's body and enveloped Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue immediately felt that her aura was isolated, and she passed through the barrier without causing any fluctuations. Soon she left the academy completely and headed west. Chu Liyue looked back and saw the silhouette of Tianlu Academy gradually disappear into the night. Chu Liyue retracted her gaze and realized that although Shui was injured, it was still very fast. It was indeed a high-level fiend. Even if it was injured, its combat power was still very strong. However, she did not know what kind of trouble Xiao had encountered that even Shui was injured. In the Imperial City, or rather in the entire country Yaochen, there seemed to be no fiend that could compare to Shui. As for Xiao, his strength was even more mysterious. No one knew who he had encountered. At this time, Chu Liyue didn't think about it at all. If even Xiao couldn't solve it with her current strength, she wouldn't be of much help. All she could think of was to be faster. Now that Xiao was in trouble, she could not sit back and do nothing. She couldn't do it either. Very quickly, Chu Liyue realized that Shui had already brought her out of the Imperial City gates. Her expression became more and more serious. At that time, Xiao said that he was going to leave for a while, and she didn't ask him where he was going. Looking at it now, it was indeed outside the imperial capital. Shui headed towards the forest outside the imperial capital. Gradually, under the moonlight, Chu Liyue began to feel that the scenery before him was somewhat familiar. This forest seemed to be the place where she was reborn. That is, the forest where the original host was assassinated outside the city. After passing through the dense forest, Xianxia finally flew down in a certain direction. After landing, Chu Liyue looked carefully and saw a sparkling lake. At this time the moonlight was just right, and the lake was shrouded in a layer of faint white smoke, looking even more tranquil. This is the place where she first met Xiao. Xianxia, why did you bring me here? Chu Liyue got down from Xianxia and quickly looked around, but she didn't see Xiao. Where's your master? Not only was Xiao not there, but there was no one around except her. Xianxia whimpered and walked towards the lake. Then it stopped beside the lake and looked at the lake, seeming a little anxious. Chu Liyue stared blankly for a while before suddenly reacting. You're saying that Xiao is in this lake? Xianxia nodded and its claws scratched the ground anxiously. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. When she first met Xiao, he was indeed here. He also said that this was his territory. But now Xianxia actually said that Xiao was under this lake. The lake was calm. Only the dense origin power on its surface made it look different from ordinary lakes. Chu Liyue walked over and looked at the lake hesitantly. He is under here. Suddenly her eyes focused. When the white fog gradually dispersed, she saw that under the clear water, there seemed to be a silver stream of light. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately looked forward. There was the same scene under the lake in the distance. This stream of light was faintly discernible under the lake. It wasn't very clear to begin with, and with the fog above the lake, it was even harder to distinguish. If one didn't stand closer, they definitely wouldn't be able to detect this abnormality. Chu Liyue focused her gaze and gradually widened her eyes. The intertwined lines of light looked very similar to a teleportation array. Chu Liyue blurted out in shock. She never expected that there would be a teleportation array hidden under the lake. Moreover, if she wasn't wrong, this teleportation array's level wasn't low. Chu Liyue looked at the intertwined streams of light below and could already vaguely feel the pressure from the teleportation array. She didn't speak for a long time. Xiao actually hid a teleportation array here. Chu Liyue realized that she had still underestimated Xiao. Such a teleportation array required at least 3 level 5 Xian masters to build. How many level 5 Xian masters were there in the entire country Yaochen? Xiao, he actually, just as countless thoughts flashed through her mind, Xianxia suddenly went forward and nudged her knees. Chu Liyue glanced at it and vaguely realized something. Xiao was probably at the place where this teleportation array would reach. We can only find Xiao if we go down from here, right? Xianxia nodded again, looking increasingly anxious. Chu Liyue made up her mind. She hugged Dumpling and jumped down. Let's go. When Chu Liyue jumped into the lake, she saw the white fog above quickly disperse in all directions. The teleportation array below shone brightly and quickly enveloped her. The lake water consciously parted. Only then did Chu Liyue realize that the light from the teleportation array automatically formed a barrier around her, perfectly protecting her. The surrounding lake water also avoided it because of this. Chu Liyue looked at the silver barrier around her strangely. Why would this teleportation array automatically protect her? It wasn't as if she had never seen a teleportation array before. She had even built many of them herself, so she knew more about them. The biggest use of a normal teleportation array was to connect 2 spaces, allowing people to quickly travel from one place to another. Inside the teleportation array, because it was connected to the void, there would often be violent energy flowing around. It was inevitable that there would be some danger when passing through it. Sometimes, in order to avoid this, some small mechanisms would be specially set up when building the teleportation array. For example, when someone passed through the teleportation array and the teleportation array sensed their aura, it would automatically form a barrier to protect them. However, she didn't know that there was a teleportation array here and had never used it before. How could this happen? However, this doubt only flashed through her mind. In the next moment, she felt her body being pulled down by a force. Her surroundings instantly fell into darkness. Wonderful book house. Chapter 236. She hugged Dumpling tightly in her arms and sensed that Xianxia was by her feet. Only then did she relax and know that they had already entered the teleportation array. The surroundings were filled with the whistling of the wind caused by the turbulence. Chu Liwei had no doubt that if not for the protection of this barrier, she would have been torn apart by the violent turbulence the moment she entered. The surroundings were pitch black and she couldn't see anything. Chu Liue's heart gradually rose. Everything was indicating that Rongxiu had too many secrets. Every time she thought she had understood enough, she would realize that what she saw was only the tip of the iceberg. At the very least, this teleportation array was definitely not something that a small princely of country Yaochen could do. After an unknown period of time, Chu Liyue finally saw a ray of light in front of her eyes. "We're here." A powerful pressure surged from all directions. Chu Liyue's eyes were instantly covered by white light. She raised her hand to cover her eyes. When the light gradually dimmed, she put down her hand and looked around. When she saw the scene in front of her clearly, she finally widened her eyes and her heart was filled with shock. This was actually a sea. It was nighttime, and only a bright moon hung in the dark night sky. A faint light shone down and the dark blue surface of the sea sparkled. The seawater kept surging and hitting the reef in a cycle. She was currently standing on the shore. Looking back, there was an endless desert. Looking forward, there was an even more mysterious sea. In the distance where the sea met the sky, there seemed to be a huge curtain hanging down from the sky and connecting with the sea. The curtain looked incomparably dark. Occasionally, one or two golden streams of light would flash across it and disappear in the blink of an eye. A boundless pressure spread out from it, causing people to unconsciously submit to it. Chu Liyue looked at this scene in shock and was speechless for a long time. This curtain. On the Black Tortoise continent there were many countries. However, these countries were also divided into ranks. For example, the Tianling dynasty was considered a superior country, while country Yaochen was only a subordinate country. The Tianling dynasty's territory was surrounded by these curtains. It was also known as the Heaven's Canopy. Anyone who wanted to enter the Tianling dynasty had to pass through their Heaven's Canopy. In reality, this Heaven's Canopy wasn't man-made. It existed naturally. The existence of Heaven's Canopy divided the Black Tortoise continent into two levels. Empires within Heaven's Canopy, such as the Tianling dynasty, had rich heaven and earth origin force. The cultivation environment there was much better than outside Heaven's Canopy. To them, the Heaven's Canopy was the protection of nature, and it also represented the honor bestowed by the heavens. There were too many people who wanted to enter Heaven's Canopy. However, the Heaven's Canopy was extremely powerful. Only when a cultivator's strength was strong enough could they successfully enter it. When she was in power, she had also heard that countless cultivators outside the Tianling dynasty's territory tried to pass through Heaven's Canopy every year. However, only a few succeeded in the end. Chu Liyue never expected that she would be directly outside Heaven's Canopy from that transportation portal. However, her gaze was quickly attracted by the scene in midair. A tall white figure was standing in midair. Even though his back was facing her, she could still recognize that it was Rongxiu. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a sinister and mocking voice coming from midair. "Your Highness, I haven't seen you for a while. Has your strength decreased so much?" Chu Liyue looked in the direction of the voice and saw that there was actually another person standing opposite Rongxiu. However, he was wearing a black robe with a hood on his head. The darkness of the night concealed his figure. Therefore, Chu Liyue didn't see him at first glance. Rongxiu laughed softly. "It seems that your Highness has been living too comfortably recently. That's why you came to court death." Chu Liyue was taken aback. "Your Highness?" Was he referring to Rongxiu? But country Yaochen didn't seem to have a Your Highness, right? Where did this identity of Rongxiu come from? Moreover, she felt that the Rongxiu in front of her now seemed to be different from the person she knew in the past. She had never heard Rongxiu speak in such a tone. Cold, majestic, disdainful, with the absolute suppression of a superior. "I forgot that this is outside Heaven's Canopy. Your realm is suppressed, so your strength is naturally greatly reduced. Otherwise, why couldn't you even take 10 of my moves?" The black-robed man's voice was sharp and cold. It was as if a sharp weapon was scraping against glass, making one feel very uncomfortable. Chu Liyue only heard these two sentences and felt the force in her body faintly become chaotic. This was caused by the opponent's strength being too strong. Chu Liyue's brows were tightly knitted. The black-robed man's strength was at least a stage 6 warrior. But his words made Chu Luiyue even more horrified. Rong Xiu's realm was suppressed. Didn't that mean that Rong Xiu's strength was at least a stage 7 warrior? If people outside wanted to enter Heaven's Canopy, their strength had to be at least a stage 6 warrior. But at most they were at the peak of stage 6. This was because cultivators outside Heaven's Canopy could only cultivate to this realm. If they wanted to break through to stage 7, they had to enter Heaven's Canopy. And once a warrior above stage 7 left Heaven's Canopy, their realm would be suppressed to stage 7 and below. Chu Luiyue secretly guessed Rong Xiu's true strength, but she didn't expect him to be so powerful. He wasn't even 20 years old this year, right? This level of talent, even compared to her previous life, was not inferior in the slightest. Don't worry. Even if it's outside Heaven's Canopy, I can still send you on your way. Rong Xiu smiled casually as if he didn't care about the other party at all. But Chu Luiyue's sharp eyes saw that the corner of his clothes seemed to be stained with blood. Haha. Your Highness, you're already injured and don't have the strength to fight anymore. I'm curious, how do you plan to kill me? The high and mighty Your Highness, the Holy Sun, has actually fallen to such a state. If this news were to spread, I'm afraid you won't have the face to continue sitting in this position. But you don't have to worry about these things. After all, your life is going to end here today. As he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his hand. He raised a blood-colored sickle. Blood sickle slash. The surrounding heaven and earth force rapidly gathered. His blood-colored sickle suddenly slashed down. A blood-colored light instantly flew toward Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu waved his sleeves and a silver disc flew out rapidly. Boom. Two powerful forces fiercely collided together. The sea water violently surged. Soon the silver disc suddenly cracked. Crack. Chapter 237. Countless streaks of light scattered in all directions. Rong Xiu quickly retreated. But the crimson scythe quickly caught up. Chu Luiyue stood behind a piece of rock, but she was still blown so hard by the strong wind that she could barely stand. Rong Xiu was already injured previously, and this attack put him at a disadvantage. Your Highness, let's end it here. The black-robed man shouted coldly, and the crimson scythe suddenly changed into several shadows. They all rushed toward Rong Xiu. In the blink of an eye they surrounded Rong Xiu. At this moment Rong Xiu raised his wrist. Turbulent waves of seawater suddenly shot up to the sky. It formed a huge water screen in front of him. The crimson scythe rushed into the water screen, but it was as if it had sunk into a swamp, and its speed immediately decreased by a lot. The black-robed man seemed to be shocked. You can actually control the sea in Heaven's Canopy? Rong Xiu chuckled. Not much, but it's enough to deal with you. After saying that, he suddenly snapped his fingers. A silver flame suddenly appeared at the tip of his long white fingers. Go. Accompanied by this cold voice, the silver flame lightly landed on the water screen. Boom. In an instant, it was as if a spark had fallen into a pot of oil, and a raging fire instantly burned. Above the deep blue water screen, a bright and cold silver flame instantly ignited. Covered the sky and covered the earth. The black-robed man sensed that something was wrong and immediately wanted to retreat. However, at this moment, another water screen rose up behind him. The silver flame quickly spread and burned over. Two burning water screens, one in front and one behind, trapped the black-robed man in the middle. Gradually, the crimson scythes that were trapped in the water screen also started to melt. The black-robed man finally panicked. He originally thought that Rong Xiu's realm was suppressed and would definitely not be his match, but he did not expect him to be able to use such a move. Your Highness, your strength is indeed not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, I came prepared this time. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding heaven and earth origin force rapidly surged into his body. The aura around him surged crazily. Soon, Chu Luiyue sensed a ripple in the distant heaven's canopy. That man had actually forcefully raised his strength to the peak of rank 6. When it sensed the aura of a rank 7 warrior, heaven's canopy would become unstable. He had clearly intentionally stuck his realm at this boundary. Outside the heaven's canopy, the highest level one can reach is the peak of the 6th level. Your Highness, the suppression of your realm is too strong. How can you be a match for me now? The black-robed man let out a strange laugh, and a white chain suddenly flew out from under his robe. The chain seemed to be made of carved bones and it emitted a cold aura. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that it was covered in dried blood. It made people shudder with fear. The chain flew out and pierced into the water screen. The chain was intercepted again, but when the silver flame neared, the dark red blood on the white bones suddenly wriggled. The silver flame licked the chain crazily, but only a series of crackling sounds could be heard. Vaguely, it sounded like the mournful cries of a malicious spirit. A hole was gradually being devoured on the water screen. The last layer of flame was extinguished and the chain quickly flew toward Xiao. Xiao suddenly looked up. His gaze was deep. He abruptly raised his hand and grabbed the chain tightly. The black-robed man suddenly looked up and laughed. Haha. Do you think this is still within heaven's canopy? Don't think I don't know that the golden body of the saint cannot be summoned outside heaven's canopy. You must die today. After saying that, he shouted in a deep voice. Ghost chain, explode. Bam, bam, bam. The white bones on the chain suddenly exploded. Xiao flung his wrist. The chain shook violently. The powerful force quickly spread to the black-robed man's body. Boom. A terrifying aura spread out in all directions with the two of them as the center. The two of them were sent flying by the impact of the force. Shui roared and flew out quickly. It originally wanted to catch Xiao, but the force was too strong. In addition, it was already injured, so it fell down together with Xiao. Shui's claws scratched a deep trench on the ground, and it finally stopped when it hit the reef. Although Xiao had Shui as a buffer, his arm still hit the reef heavily. On the other hand, although the black-robed man was also affected, it was not as serious as Xiao, and he quickly stabilized himself. The outcome of the two of them was obvious. Xiao's hand was on the rough reef. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly realized something and looked up. Behind the reef, in the shadows, there was a pair of clear eyes. It was a face that he couldn't be more familiar with. Why was she here? Before Xiao could think clearly, he felt a cold wind coming from behind. He quickly and resolutely shouted in a low voice. Dodge. However, Liwei did not dodge. Instead, her eyes seemed to be burning with flames. When she exchanged glances with Xiao, she clearly saw the bloodstains on Xiao's face and body. Ever since they met, the Xiao she saw was always strong and calm. Even when he was fighting the black flying python, his clothes were always neat and tidy. She had never seen him in such a sorry state. She did not know why, but a nameless anger suddenly rose from the bottom of her heart. In midair, the blood-red sharp blade flew over and was about to land on Xiao's body. Liwei didn't even think as she jumped and flipped over from behind the reef. Immediately she pulled Xiao away. At this moment the blood-red sharp blade had arrived. It was close at hand. She could already clearly feel the terrifying pressure. She grabbed Xiao's hand tightly and with a turn of her feet, she blocked in front of Xiao. Xiao immediately guessed what she was planning to do and his heart suddenly tightened. With her current strength, how could she withstand this attack? A dumpling suddenly flew out and went straight for the blood-red blade. Its small body was overturned in a blink of an eye. The strength of a 6th-stage peak warrior was extremely terrifying and it was not something it could handle. On the other side, Shui struggled to stand up, but with a few more wounds on its body, it could not get up at all. Liwei suddenly pushed Xiao away. Xiao's heart was empty and in the next moment he pulled her tightly into his arms. Liwei suddenly bumped into his chest and the tip of her nose hurt. But at this moment she did not care about this, and the first sentence that came out of her mouth was, "Danger. Run." Digression. Kavenka is in so much pain that he wishes he was dead. The remaining 2 updates will probably be released in the afternoon. Kavenka is so unbearable. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 238. Xiao held her tightly in his arms. When he heard her voice, he suddenly froze. She actually told him to run first? Did she know what she meant by doing this? Seeing that Xiao didn't move, Liwei anxiously shouted again. Hurry. This shout woke Rong Xiu up from his dream. He looked at the girl in his arms. She was slender, young but brave and fearless. At this moment his figure was finally clearly reflected in her eyes. He heard his heart beating rapidly and even the blood in his limbs and bones surged. Deep in his heart, it was as if thousands of joy were surging up one after another, drowning him. Chu Luiyue already felt the imminent danger behind her. Her hair stood on end. She wanted to push Rong Xiu away, but he hugged her so tightly that she couldn't break free. This person. He was usually a strategist who could decide victory from 1,000 miles away. Why was he suddenly stunned at this moment? Rong Xiu, do you really want to die here? Chu Luiyue asked through gritted teeth. Rong Xiu's eyes were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. It was like a whirlpool that wanted to swallow her. His thin lips lifted slightly and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Of course not. It wasn't easy to wait for this day. How could he die? He looked deeply at Chu Luiyue and an undercurrent surged. Chu Luiyue didn't know how to describe his gaze, and the words that were about to come out of her mouth suddenly couldn't come out. The next moment he lowered his gaze and his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue's slender and fair neck. She had tied the colored glass barrier around her neck. With a light hook of his finger, the colored glass barrier fell into his palm. Whoosh! He circulated his force and the colored glass barrier instantly unfolded. The barrier glowing with a faint silver color immediately enveloped the two of them. Boom! The powerful force rushed over and crashed into the colored glass barrier. The colored glass barrier suddenly trembled. However, in the end he still managed to isolate that ball of energy. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked. Looks like this glazed barrier that Rong Xiu gave her wasn't ordinary either, to actually be able to forcefully withstand the attack of a peak tier 6 powerhouse. Is it a woman? The black-robed man stood in the air and looked down at the two of them. To be precise, he was looking at Chu Luiyue. Although she was tightly held in Rong Xiu's arms and her face could not be seen, one could still tell that she was a young girl with a graceful figure. After a brief moment of dead silence, he suddenly laughed out loud. Haha. So that was how it was. No wonder the Saint Prince was willing to stay outside Heaven's canopy for such a long time. It was all because of a woman. Rumor has it that His Highness, the Holy Sun, does not get close to women and is proud and aloof. Who would have thought that he would actually lose his head over a woman? If this news were to spread, it would probably cause a huge commotion. Chu Luiyue was even more confused. Why did these words sound so strange? Could it be that Rong Xiu had always been inside Heaven's canopy? How could this be? Close your eyes. Rong Xiu lowered his head and gently kissed her eyes. His voice was low and gentle. Chu Luiyue did not know why, but she obediently closed her eyes and leaned into his arms. The moment he opened his mouth, that terrifying threat seemed to quietly dissipate. It was as if as long as he was around, all the dangers were not worth mentioning. She did not know where this inexplicable peace of mind came from, but she seemed to be very used to it. Seeing that she was obediently lying in his arms, Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a dark light and his arms tightened. Then he finally looked at the black-robed man. A faint golden light appeared in his eyes that were as deep as the night. The black-robed man's laughter suddenly stopped. Just now, Rong Xiu raised his hand and lightly pointed forward. A dazzling golden flame suddenly appeared at his fingertip. The saint's golden body. How could this be? This is outside Heaven's canopy. Chi. Rong Xiu flicked his finger and that golden flame instantly flew out. It was just a small ball, but in the eyes of the black-robed man, it was like a life-taking talisman. He retreated in fear and used all his speed, hoping to get away as soon as possible. How could this be? Outside Heaven's canopy, the realm of cultivators would be suppressed to below stage 7 warriors. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to summon the saint's golden body. But now, Rong Xiu's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Even though he had already used all his strength to escape, the golden flame's speed was even faster. Not long later, it silently landed on the dark blue sea surface. The moment that golden flame touched the sea surface, everything in the surroundings seemed to have stopped. The waves of the sea suddenly stopped and the waves hit the reef. Even the 2 water curtains burning with silver flames froze. The black-robed man only felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, and he started to find it difficult to move. This was the pressure of an absolute powerhouse. He turned around in a panic and saw Xiao standing by the shore, hugging the woman in his arms tightly and looking at him coldly and disdainfully. That gaze was as if he was looking at an ant that was about to die. Cold. Indifferent. No one dared to have the slightest intention of disobedience. The next moment Xiao's lips moved slightly. Break. With that, the place where the golden flame was suddenly collapsed, revealing a piece of darkness in the void. That was the collapse of space. The black-robed man was horrified. He couldn't care about anything else and turned to run. But his body didn't seem to have any reaction. He looked down in shock and realized that his entire body was also frozen by that terrifying power and he couldn't move at all. And at this moment, with the golden flame as the center, the surrounding space started to collapse. The black void expanded as if it was forming a huge black hole. Seawater, waves, flames, everything was swallowed into that collapsing space. Soon that black color had spread to the black-robed man's feet. No. He screamed in horror and frantically tried to move his body, but it was futile. In the end, he could only watch as his feet disappeared along with the collapse of space. Everything happened so quickly that he didn't even feel the pain. The collapsing space had already swallowed his thighs. Only when his waist was also crushed did the bone-piercing pain finally come. The mournful screams sounded particularly eerie in the empty sea. He looked at Xiao with hatred and said sternly, "Saint," forcefully summoning the golden body outside heaven's canopy. "Aren't you afraid of being punished?" Xiao narrowed his eyes. Noisy. The speed of the collapsing space became even faster. Before the black-robed man could finish his sentence, his entire body was swallowed. If Liwei looked back at this moment, he would see that more than half of the space between the sea and the sky had already collapsed. The huge black void strangely and quietly appeared there. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could have such a powerful means. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 239. Xiao withdrew the golden flame and the black void began to gradually recover. When everything returned to normal, the golden light in Xiao's eyes finally dissipated, and the deep gaze returned. Immediately he gently patted Liwei's back. "All right." Liwei slowly raised her head and glanced at him. Xiao looked no different from before. But she faintly felt that the Xiao here seemed to be different from the one she saw before. She wondered if it was because of the so-called Holy Sun identity. Suppressing the doubts in her heart, she turned back to take a look. The magnificent sea had returned to its calm state. The two burning water curtains from before had completely dissipated and disappeared without a trace. And the man in the black robe had indeed disappeared without a trace. "He's dead." Xiao faintly responded with a as if he didn't care. Liwei's heart suddenly jumped. The man in the black robe was a peak 6th rank warrior. He actually died just like that. And there was no corpse left. How did Xiao do it? Although she was leaning in Xiao's arms just now and didn't see anything, she could still hear the movements and sounds clearly. She could roughly guess what had happened. But she really couldn't imagine how Xiao killed the man in the black robe. He had been standing here holding her and didn't even move a step. She had too many questions in her heart. But when the words reached her mouth, she suddenly couldn't speak. Xiao suddenly took out a white handkerchief and carefully wiped the blood off his hands. Liwei glanced at it. It was the one he lent her the last time. The two of them suddenly fell into silence. Liwei then realized that her hands were still tightly clutching the front of his clothes, and her whole body was tightly in his arms. An ambiguous and subtle aura gradually spread out. Now that she had calmed down, she came back to her senses and gradually remembered what she had done. Instantly he was dumbfounded. Did she just jump out for Xiao? At that time she didn't even seem to care about her own life. She just did it so straightforwardly. Her fingers curled up slightly, not knowing if she should retreat first. Being so close to Xiao made her face burn. "What are you thinking about?" asked Xiao casually as he glanced down and guessed her thoughts. "I think you and I." It seemed strange. Chu Luiyue blurted out, but she immediately stopped mid-sentence. No matter how he phrased it, it didn't seem right. Rong Xiu chuckled and put away the handkerchief. After making sure that there was no blood on his hands, he finally nodded in satisfaction and looked at her. Me and you? What's wrong? Chu Luiyue coughed and pushed him but realized that she couldn't push him away. She could only give up. Nothing, I was just thinking, what did that person mean when he said that you would be punished for summoning the golden body of the Son of Saint outside heaven's canopy? Rong Xiu paused and suddenly reached out to hold her face. Chu Luiyue could only look up and meet his eyes. Coincidentally, I also want to ask a question. When we were in danger just now, you stood in front of me and let me go first. What do you mean by that? His tone was gentle and slow, but his eyes were deep and serious. Chu Luiyue was instantly embarrassed. In fact, she also didn't know why she did that. She had a vague guess in her heart, but she couldn't say it out loud. You haven't answered my question. As long as you tell me the answer to this question, I will tell you everything you want to know. Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue stared at him. He was obviously doing it on purpose. Rong Xiu looked at her embarrassed face and really loved it. He inched closer. The two of them were so close that they could hear each other's breathing. He chuckled. Actually, I have an answer, but I don't know if it's right. Why don't I tell you and you just have to say if it's right or not? How about it? Chu Luiyue blinked in a daze and saw that his eyes had suddenly become exceptionally dark. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Immediately, his fingers slid down from her cheeks and pinched her chin, forcing her to raise her face slightly. He lowered his head and moved closer. Chu Luiyue only felt something soft and slightly cold on her lips. That familiar cold fragrance suddenly became rich, and in an instant, it permeated between his lips and teeth. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes, and her heart felt as if it had been heavily rubbed by something. It was unbelievably sweet and soft. Rong Xiu was kissing her. The sea breeze was gentle and the moonlight was bright. She could even see the faint shadows cast by his thick eyelashes on his eyelids. Rong Xiu originally wanted to kiss her lightly, but the moment he touched that incredible softness, he felt as if something in his heart had suddenly collapsed. Almost instinctively he bit her lips, grinding and sucking on them. A blazing heat spread from between their lips. Chu Luiyue felt as if her whole body was burning and her limbs were a little weak. She finally found her reason and pushed Rong Xiu. However, she was no match for Rong Xiu. At this time her limbs were even weaker and her two pushes were like scratching an itch. Not only did she not push Rong Xiu away, but she also gently tickled his heart, making him more restless. His arm wrapped around her slim waist and she was almost embedded into his body. Chu Luiyue spat out a few vague syllables between her lips and teeth. Rong Xiu then slightly let go of her and looked at her with a deep gaze. What do you think of this answer? As soon as he spoke, Chu Luiyue realized that his voice was very hoarse, as if he was restraining something. Her face turned even redder and she glared at him. He was still as shameless as ever. Little did she know that at this time her eyes were watery from the kiss, and her face was like a peach blossom. This glare made half of Rong Xiu's body go limp. The other half was the exact opposite. He gently rubbed his fingers on her cheeks and with an ambiguous burning sensation he murmured in a low voice, "It seems wrong." Then what about this? As soon as he finished speaking, he lowered his head and kissed her lips again. This time his movements were very fast. Before she could react, he had already attacked her. Chu Luiyue was ashamed and angry. In a fit of anger, she simply started to counterattack. She released her hands that were originally holding onto his chest and reached up, hooking them around his neck and pressing her whole body closer. At the same time she imitated him and bit his lips, gently licking them. Rong Xiu's body stiffened. Did she know what she was doing? Chu Luiyue felt that he suddenly stopped and she was even more unconvinced, so she went in a little further. The two of them touched, lingering in the air. Rong Xiu sucked in a breath of cold air. Digression. Congratulations on picking up a broken February mobile phone. User, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 240. I have to stop. Rong Xiu thought to himself. Otherwise he really couldn't tell what he would do. However, she was so sweet and soft that he couldn't control himself. He had been waiting for this day for too long. One time, another time. Rong Xiu's hand held her waist tightly. She could feel that he was suppressing something through her clothes. The girl in his arms gradually softened into a ball, as if he could knead her however he wanted. She belonged to him. She belonged only to him. Chu Luiyue gradually felt that Rong Xiu's aura was becoming a little dangerous. She instinctively felt that it wasn't good to continue like this. Finally, she took the initiative to step back. She tilted her head and leaned against his shoulder. Rong Xiu's hand rubbed her waist a few times. It was a little itchy. He took a deep breath and finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. "If you do this again next time," Chu Luiyue blinked and deliberately asked, "If you do this again next time, what will you do?" Rong Xiu looked at her meaningfully. There seemed to be sparks in his eyes that would burn at any time. "Of course, you're welcome." Chu Luiyue was speechless. As expected, it wasn't a wise choice to be thick-skinned with someone. However, seeing Rong Xiu like this, she didn't dare to continue teasing him deliberately. She quietly held his hand. Rong Xiu rubbed his chin against the soft hair on the top of her head. Then he looked into her eyes and said seriously, "You haven't said whether this answer is right or not." His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. Chu Luiyue never thought that someone as powerful as Rong Xiu would feel nervous. He was waiting for her answer. How important was it in his heart that he would be so careful and cautious when asking for an answer? Chu Luiyue stared at him. Many scenes flashed through her mind. She was stunned when she first saw him by the lake. She was surprised when she saw him again at the palace banquet. She was moved at Wanling Mountain. Scenes flashed by one after another, and in the end they all disappeared. All that was left was the face of the evildoer before him, which became increasingly clear. In fact, she had always treated Rong Xiu differently, but she was unwilling to admit it for various reasons. But now that he thought about it, those were just some unimportant reasons. Even if she had a heart-wrenching past, that was all in her previous life. Now, there was someone who was willing to embrace her new life and give her bright and warm expectations. She stood on her tiptoes and planted a light kiss on his lips. Rong Xiu's pupils shrank, but there were thousands of fireworks in his eyes. "Rong Xiu." She looked up at him and said in the same serious tone, "For me, there is only one question and one answer in my life. There's no betrayal and no regret. Do you understand?" Her voice was very calm, but there were too many emotions in her eyes. Those unbearable past were her eternal scars. She definitely couldn't bear a second betrayal. Rong Xiu's heart seemed to be clenched by something, and it hurt. After a moment, his thin lips lifted slightly and he chuckled, "What a coincidence, so do I." He held her hand tightly and looked into her eyes. "When we go back, I'll go to your residence to propose marriage." Chu Luiyue was stunned and asked subconsciously, "So soon?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Is it very soon? But I've been waiting for a long time." As long as he didn't kidnap her back, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Chu Luiyue wanted to say something, but when she looked up and saw his expression, her heart suddenly moved. For some reason, she always seemed to be exceptionally easy to talk to when facing Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu didn't dare to touch her again for fear that he couldn't control himself, so he could only settle for the second best and kiss her forehead. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly stopped and leaned on Chu Luiyue's shoulder. Chu Luiyue glanced sideways and realized that Rong Xiu's face was exceptionally pale. He seemed to have fainted. Rong Xiu. On the fourth day of the Qingjiao competition, the first 3 days of the warrior competition had finally ended. The Xian Master students from the 3 academies were all eager to get a good ranking in the Xian Master competition today. Unlike the one-on-one competition a few days ago, the Xian Master competition was held together by everyone. The huge arena had been evenly divided into squares. A chessboard was placed in each square. There were 5 Xian formations on each chessboard. Whoever could solve these 5 Xian formations the fastest would be first. At a glance, many people were already in position waiting for the competition to start. However, there was some commotion on Tianlu Academy's side. "Lu Yu isn't here yet?" Bai Qin asked with a frown. Mu Hongyu shook her head. She was also rather anxious. "When we went to look for her this morning, she wasn't at her residence." We thought she was here first, but we didn't expect her to be here either. I already asked Xinhu to go back and look for her." As she spoke, she turned to look at the entrance and saw Xinhu panting as he returned. However, Chu Luiyue wasn't behind him. Mu Hongyu's heart sank, but she still walked forward quickly and asked, "Where's Lu Yu? Did you find her?" Xinhu placed one hand on his knee and panted heavily as he waved his hand repeatedly. "No. I looked everywhere, but I didn't see her." Mu Hongyu was silent for a moment before she suddenly thought of something. "What about Juyo Tower? Did you look for her there? She usually likes to go there to cultivate. Did she forget to come out?" Xinhu shook his head. "I already asked. She didn't go there yesterday or today." Bai Qin thought for a while and muttered uncertainly. Could it be that she was too tired yesterday so she went home? Si Yang couldn't help but interject. That shouldn't be the case. She said yesterday that she would definitely participate in today's Xian Master competition. Why did she suddenly not participate? Even if she used up a lot of energy in yesterday's competition, Chu Liuyue's talent and ability as a Xian Master were extremely outstanding. As long as she participated in the competition, her results wouldn't be bad. Why did she suddenly disappear? "Students who haven't gone up yet, please hurry up. The competition is about to start," the referee shouted from afar. Sun Zhongyan walked over. "Lu Yu isn't here yet?" The few of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Sun Zhongyan felt a little uneasy. He remembered that Chu Luiyue had indeed returned to the academy yesterday, but why was she missing now? From yesterday until today he didn't notice anything strange in the academy. If Chu Luiyue had gone out and entered the academy, the teachers in charge of guarding the entrance would definitely know. But now, did something really happen? After all, she had offended many people in the past few days. However, this was the Imperial City and the Qingjiao competition was being held. No one would be so stupid as to make a move on Chu Luiyue at this time. Sun Zhongyan thought for a while and said, "Don't worry about the Xian Master competition. Don't worry about the Xian Master competition for now. The most important thing right now is to find the person. Bai Qin, bring some people to the academy to look for her again. Also, send some people to the Imperial City to gather information and see if they can find any traces. Also inform Lord Chu Ning." Yes. Digression. Today's February was a useless February. It could only update 2 chapters at 9 p.m., and the rest would probably be updated before 3 p.m. Chapter 241. Chu Luiyue naturally didn't know that everyone was frantically searching for her in the capital. She only cared about Rongxiu now. After Rongxiu fainted, she took his pulse and found that the situation in his body was very strange. She actually couldn't detect Rongxiu's yuan meridian. After trying twice, she could only vaguely feel that there seemed to be 2 forces colliding in Rongxiu's body. She couldn't sense anything else. Chu Luiyue guessed that Rongxiu's coma should be related to forcefully summoning the so-called Holy Sun's golden body. It was impossible to forcefully raise one's strength to a stage 7 warrior outside heaven's canopy. It was just that she had never heard of anyone who could do this before, so she didn't know what was going on. She carefully let Rongxiu lean on a relatively flat reef. Looking at his pale face, she felt a little anxious. Shui walked over from the side and rubbed against her leg, whimpering softly. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. "You're saying that he's fine?" Shui nodded and secretly gave its master a look of disdain. Its master was so powerful that this little bit of trouble was really nothing. If Chu Luiyue didn't come, he could still go back. But since she was here and the 2 of them happened to be engaged, it was normal for him to take advantage of this opportunity to play the trick of injuring himself. Shui simply lay down. Anyway, that man from the unparalleled palace was already dead. It wouldn't be too late to go back after its master recovered. Seeing Shui's attitude, Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved. Since Shui felt that Rongxiu was fine, then there was no need to worry too much. She half-hugged Rongxiu and leaned on the reef quietly, waiting for him to wake up. Dumpling finally woke up and climbed onto her shoulder again, rubbing against her face pitifully. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. Dumpling was indeed not injured. Somehow, its resistance to beatings seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. The sea breeze at night was a little salty, and the moonlight shone on the surface of the sea. The surroundings were barren. But Chu Luiyue didn't feel lonely. On the contrary, this was a rare peaceful night since her rebirth. She lowered her eyes and looked at Rongxiu, her gaze lingering on his face. In fact, there was one thing that she didn't tell Rongxiu just now. When he summoned the golden body of the saint, his entire person became different. Cold, indifferent, high up above. She had never seen such a Rong before. But she faintly felt a little familiar. She didn't know where this familiarity came from. She was certain that she had never seen him before. As long as she had, she would definitely remember. But when she was facing Rongxiu, she always felt an inexplicable sense of security. Have we met before? Chu Luiyue muttered softly. Then she felt that her thought was a little ridiculous, so she smiled and closed her eyes. Her voice was very soft and it dissipated in the night wind. But she didn't see Rongxiu's eyelashes trembling slightly. At the Qingjiao competition, Chu Luiyue was indeed missing. Sun Zhongyan still had to take care of the Qingjiao competition, so he handed this matter to Bai Qin and the rest. Although they were also very anxious, they couldn't make it public now. Even when he went to look for Chuning, he did it secretly. Chuning wanted to use the Imperial Guards, but he gave up after thinking about it. He only asked a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly ask around in the capital. He even personally went to the Zhenbao Pavilion. Yan Gu was also surprised when he heard that Chu Luiyue was missing, and he agreed to help without hesitation. Chuning was just trying his luck, but he didn't expect Yan Gu to be so willing to help. He was both grateful and confused. The Zhenbao Pavilion had an extraordinary status, and Yan Gu was even more so as the second in charge. But he seemed to be very concerned about you. Whether it was the previous time when he booked the entire Phoenix restaurant or this time, it was not something that an ordinary friendship could do. He tried to ask, but Yan Gu only smiled and said that he got along well with Chu Luiyue. Now that she was the champion of the Qingjiao competition, her future was limitless, so it was normal for him to want to get along with her. Chuning vaguely felt that something was wrong. Being the champion of the Qingjiao competition was not bad, but it didn't seem to be worth the Zhenbao Pavilion's effort. But looking at Yan Gu, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him, so he didn't continue asking. He only hoped to find you as soon as possible. After Chuning left, the smile on Yan Ji's face immediately disappeared, and he quickly ordered his subordinates to take action. Master wasn't in the capital, but Madam was missing. What was going on? If Master came back and found out that he didn't take good care of Madam, wait. Yan Gu suddenly thought of something and was stunned. Master was gone and Madam was missing. Could it be? Yan Ji's heart was on fire, but he didn't dare to leave the capital. Without Master's permission, no one was allowed to go to that place. He wanted to ask Yan Qing and the others, but he was afraid that he would be discovered. After thinking for a long time, he could only pray that Master was with Madam. After a few hours, the sky was bright and Chu Luiyue opened her eyes. She moved and realized that she had unknowingly laid in Rongxiu's arms. His black cloak was still covering her body. Rongxiu, when did you wake up? Chu Luiyue rubbed her eyes and asked. At the same time, she felt embarrassed. She had planned to guard Rongxiu, but she didn't expect that she would fall asleep and didn't even know that he had woken up. With a smile on his lips, Rongxiu easily carried her up. Chu Luiyue exclaimed and hugged his neck instinctively. It seemed that Rongxiu had recovered. I just woke up too, Rongxiu said. Chu Luiyue didn't believe him, but she didn't ask for details. Rongxiu kissed her. We should go back. Chu Luiyue asked uncertainly, have you recovered? After experiencing such a fierce and dangerous fight yesterday, and then suddenly fainted, she was still worried. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. Whether it's good or not, you'll know when we get married. Of course you have to check now. Although this place isn't very good, it's not impossible. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and put her arms around his neck. She moved closer and said with a smile, really? Do you still want yesterday? With a soft and warm body in his arms, yesterday's scenes came back to his mind. He tightened his arms slightly, suppressed the restlessness in his heart and glanced at her warningly. This little thing was as bad as always. Rongxiu felt that he had the potential to be a saint since he could endure to this point. He chuckled and turned the tables. You probably don't know, but Prince Li's mansion has prepared everything for the wedding. We can get married immediately after the marriage proposal. Digression. Lost. Pain. The remaining updates are being filled. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 242. Chu Liyue was speechless. She felt more and more that Xiao seemed to have already prepared and was just waiting for her to agree. What if I don't come this time? She asked. Xiao glanced at her. If you don't come this time, next time you will come. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. Your Highness Prince Li is so confident. What if I don't agree? Wouldn't those things be in vain? Oh, that's not right. Your Highness Prince Li can find someone else. Xiao's tone was calm. It will only be you. If you don't agree, I'll just burn it. Anyway, it was prepared for her from the beginning. If she didn't want it, then there was no point in it existing. Of course, he never thought about this. He was determined to get her. Chu Liyue was stunned. He spoke with a calm expression as if he was talking about something very ordinary. He didn't feel that these words were so shocking. She paused and finally asked. When did you start preparing those things? Did Xiao really like her from the first time they met? That ragged and blood-stained girl? Xiao narrowed his eyes. A long time ago. A long time ago? How long ago was that? Chu Liyue wanted to ask more, but Xiao had already carried her and stepped into the teleportation array. Countless streams of light instantly formed a barrier around the two of them. Their vision turned dark, and the two of them entered the void of the teleportation array. The two of them quickly returned to the forest. After coming out of the lake, the barrier around the two of them finally dissipated. Chu Liyue turned around to take a look. It was noon. The dense white mist on the lake seemed to dissipate a little, and the streams of light below the teleportation array seemed to be hidden. From the outside, it was impossible to detect anything unusual. There is a barrier outside the lake. Ordinary people can't get close, so naturally they won't find this teleportation array. Xiao seemed to have guessed her thoughts and explained faintly. Chu Liyue nodded and then he remembered something. So you're saying that you deliberately let me in? Xiao glanced at Shui with a faint smile. Shui raised her neck proudly. What happened? What happened? I did it on purpose. If it wasn't for him taking the initiative, he didn't know when his master would be able to get married. Humph. Dumpling looked at Shui with disdain. Sure enough, the master was shameless and the magical beast he raised was the same. Shui bared her teeth at Dumpling. Dumpling swung its tail and faced it with its butt. Chu Liyue could not help but laugh. For some reason, Dumpling did not seem to be afraid of Shui, and even provoked her from time to time. Logically speaking, Shui was a high-level magical beast and Dumpling's level was much lower than it. There was a difference in level between the two, so Dumpling did not dare to do this. However, when she thought about how Dumpling ignored the black flying python's orders, she felt relieved. When she had the chance, she had to study Dumpling carefully. Oh right. There's still the Qingjiao competition today. Chu Liyue looked at the swaying sunlight in the forest and suddenly remembered that there was a competition today. The competition should have already started at this time. Xiao smiled. You seem to care a lot about the Qingjiao competition. Chu Liyue nodded honestly. The competition is not important. What's important is the rewards. Although she had already gotten first place in the warrior competition since she had signed up, it was better to get more rewards. Seeing Chu Liyue's bright eyes, Xiao started to reflect. It seems that I gave her too few rewards last time. Do you still want to participate in the Qingjiao competition? Chu Liyue shrugged. I'm afraid I won't be able to make it in time if I go back now. Xiao smiled faintly. If you want to participate, you can still make it in time. Yengu had been anxiously waiting for Chu Liyue's news in Zhenbao Pavilion. As he was worried that he would alert the enemy, he did not go out personally. Instead, he secretly sent out many people. However, time passed by bit. It was almost noon, but there was still no movement. His heart was in his mouth. He thought that if he still couldn't find her in the evening, he would have to resort to extreme measures. Just as he was waiting impatiently, he suddenly sensed something and took out a palm-sized compass from his bosom. That compass was used by his master to send messages. In all these years his master had only used it less than 3 times. He did not expect it to be used now. The purple jade needle on the compass shook a few times before finally pointing in a certain direction. Yan Gu did not hesitate and rushed out. Jianan Square. The entire square was very quiet. The arena was filled with participating Xian masters. As the Xian master competition required more concentration, everyone consciously kept quiet. However, the atmosphere of the competition was getting more and more tense. Bang! A soft sound was heard. In the arena, 3 stars lit up on the stone platform in front of a Xian master. That meant that he had already solved the first 3 Xian formations. That's Xing Yiming from Nanfeng Academy. He's only 18 years old this year, but he's already a level 4 Xian master. He's considered one of the best among these students. There are less than 10 people in this arena who are stronger than a level 4 Xian master, right? In the end, the first place should be decided among these people. Look, Xianwan has also solved 3 formations. The Xian masters from Nanfeng Academy seem to be very powerful. Speaking of which, elder son from Tianlu Academy is also a Xian master. Logically speaking, the Xian masters he nurtured should be very outstanding. Why hasn't anyone from their academy solved the 3rd formation yet? That Si Ting seems to be his student, right? I heard that he's quite powerful, but I don't know how he compares to the others. Hey, isn't Chu Luiyue also a Xian master? She can even activate a level 4 black crystal Xian formation. Why isn't she here today? In the arena, Si Ting held a chess piece and didn't place it down for a long time. He turned his head to look at the empty seat beside him and slightly furrowed his brows. Chu Luiyue isn't here yet. According to her personality, there's no reason for her to not participate in the competition after signing up. Master also seemed to be a little anxious just now. I wonder if it has something to do with Chu Luiyue. He thought for a while, suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and placed that chess piece down. Bang! The 3rd formation was solved easily. Look, Si Ting solved it too. He seems to be a level 4 Xian master too. But his ranking is still quite low. Seems like Nanfeng Academy is going to be first. The crowd discussed softly. Situ Xingchen sat in her seat and seemed to be watching the situation in the arena, but her gaze kept darting to Tianlu Academy's side. Chu Luiyue actually didn't show up today. Qing Han noticed her gaze and naturally guessed what she was thinking. He sneered. Xingchen, you don't have to look anymore. That Chu Luiyue must be scared, so she ran away at the last minute. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 243. Situ Xingchen said hesitantly, no way. She even activated a 4th level Xian crystal Xian formation yesterday. If she's here to compete, she shouldn't be too bad. Qing Han didn't think much of it. You've been focusing on celestial physician, so you naturally don't know about the tricks of the Xian master competition. Even though the Xian crystal Xian formation is a 4th level one, it can't be activated by only a 4th level Xian master. You have to know that this thing was originally engraved to make it convenient for mystic cultivators to quickly unleash mystic formations during battle and increase their combat strength. It's not that difficult to activate it. Chu Luiyue is only a stage 2 Xian master now. He only got 1st place in the warrior competition because of some unorthodox methods. The so-called unorthodox methods were naturally referring to her blood ferret. Qing Han thought for a day and still couldn't figure out how the blood ferret could directly swallow Heng Jingshua's force. However, there must be a reason for this abnormality. In his eyes, Chu Luiyue didn't get 1st place with his own abilities. Hence he actually didn't think highly of Chu Luiyue. There were too many variables in the previous one-on-one competition. However, this Xian master competition is different. You can tell the difference with one look. Situ Xingchen nodded lightly. Actually, she agreed with Qing Han's point of view. However, based on Tianlu Academy's reaction, something seemed amiss. Did something really happen to Chu Luiyue? Situ Xingchen watched for a while and was curious. However, it wasn't easy to find out in public. That's true. There was another matter that made her feel uncomfortable. After yesterday's competition ended, she sent someone to find out about Princely Mansion. However, Princely Mansion was heavily guarded, so she didn't get any useful information. She was a little disappointed, but on second thought that person always did things this way, so it was normal. Besides, this was the Imperial City. He would definitely be more careful than before. Luckily, there were some rumors about princely mansion in the Imperial City, so she more or less heard about it. However, she was even more surprised after hearing about it. That person had returned to the Imperial City for a month, but he didn't even leave the residence. The only time he went out was to attend the Crown Prince's birthday banquet. Most importantly, it was rumored that he had helped Chu Luyue during the palace banquet. The rumors in the streets were more or less exaggerated. After all, outsiders did not know about the matters in the palace, so no one knew exactly what had happened. She didn't want to believe it from the bottom of her heart. She only thought that it was just a hearsay made up by everyone after dinner. According to that person's character, why would he help for no reason? Even if he did, there should be other reasons. After all, Chu Luyue was still Crown Prince Rongjin's fiancé back then. He probably wouldn't even spare a second glance at a woman like her. Zhou Xian could only console herself like this. However, there was another matter that she found even stranger. He actually went to Tianlu Academy. On the surface, it was said that he was doing this to pay respects to his mother. However, he had not done this for so many years. This time he must have other motives. However, she did not know what attracted him to Tianlu Academy. Zhou Xian had many questions in her heart, and she wanted to see him personally to clarify them. However, he seemed to have coincidentally left the Imperial City these 2 days. I wonder if I can meet him here before the Qingjiao competition ends. In the blink of an eye, it was already afternoon. There were only 4 hours left for the competition. In the arena, the Xian masters who had yet to solve the first and second formations became increasingly nervous. At this point, only by solving the first 3 formations could they hope to solve the last 2 Xian formations in the last 4 hours. Those who failed to do so were basically guaranteed to be eliminated. Plop. Someone suddenly fainted in the arena. Sun Zhongyan took a look and ordered the judges to carry the person down hurriedly. He then shook his head. Forcefully solving the Xian formation will only hurt yourself. It will only be harmful to your future cultivation. In actual fact, such a situation would happen in the Xian Master competition every year. However, no matter how much they tried to persuade them, there would always be people who refused to admit defeat and wanted to give it a try. However, Xian Masters were not warriors. Xian Masters relied more on talent and comprehension. If not, they wouldn't be able to improve much even if they studied Xian formations day and night. Reality was cruel and no one had a choice. Finally, in this deathly silent atmosphere, someone stood up. Su Bai from Nanfeng Academy withdraws. He stood there with a pale face. His body was on the verge of collapsing, and it was obvious that he could not hold on any longer. Only one star lit up on the stone platform in front of him. The judges took back his wooden token and comforted him before letting him leave the arena. The young man's face darkened. He stared at the wooden token for a long time with reluctance before turning to leave. The onlookers did not look down on him and only sighed at most. He's already a 1 in 1,000 talent to be able to become a Xian master. It's a pity that only a few can become top-notch Xian masters. There's always someone better than you. The path of a Xian master really places a lot of emphasis on talent. With the first person withdrawing, it was as if a hole had been torn in the hearts of the crowd. Soon there was a second and third person. Gradually, when there were only 3 hours left, half of the people in the arena had left. The rest of them were either truly talented and powerful, or they were still holding on for dear life. Bang! The stone platform in front of Xing Yiming was the first to light up with the 4th star. He was the first to crack the 4th Xian formation and entered the last round. The people from Nanfeng Academy could not suppress their excitement. Even Fu Yunshan could not help but stroke his beard and reveal a satisfied smile. Xing Yiming was their academy's student with the highest chance of becoming the Xian master. It seemed that he had not disappointed him. As long as he maintained this momentum, the final first place would definitely be his. Xing Yiming's activation of the last round had undoubtedly added an invisible pressure to the others. A few more people withdrew one after another. Soon there were only a few people left in the arena. Not long after Xing Yiming, Su Feng from Taiyan Academy also caught up. Most people's gazes were focused on the two of them. If there were no accidents, the two of them would decide the final winner. The atmosphere on Tianlu Academy's side was a little stagnant. This was because they were the only ones who had not broken through to the last round. Suddenly, another person fainted. Sun Zhongyan frowned. That student was actually an outstanding Xian master from their academy. He did not know if it was because he was too anxious, but the force in his body collided and he fainted. Now the only person left who had a chance of continuing the competition was Si Ting. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 244. Everyone from Tianlu Academy fell silent. The others also noticed this and started discussing in low voices. I didn't expect Tianlu Academy to only have one freshman left. I'm afraid we won't get anything this time. Not necessarily. I heard that Si Ting is the eldest young master of the Si family. He has always been talented as a Xian master. Maybe he can make a comeback in the end. I think it'll be difficult. Can't you see that he hasn't solved the 4th level yet? Xing Yiming and Su Bai are about to finish. Right at this moment, Si Ting placed a chess piece on the board calmly. Bang! The 4th star suddenly flashed on the stone table in front of him. Everyone suddenly fell silent. They did not expect Si Ting to solve the 4th level at this time. Other than Xing Yiming and Su Bai, he was already in the top 3. Sun Zhongyan heaved a sigh of relief. As Si Ting's master, he knew Si Ting's potential the best. Si Ting had been deliberately hiding his strength previously, so he appeared to be lukewarm. However, he seemed to have the intention to fight for first place now. Si Ting was very calm when he entered the last level, but the people around him were a little surprised. Xing Yiming and Su Bai could not help but turn to look at him with subtle expressions. This Si Ting seemed to have underestimated him previously. Shi Wanwan, who was at the side, frowned. Her pretty face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of frost. She was originally very confident in herself, but she did not expect a freshman to beat her to it. She could not help but say, "I didn't expect you to be so good." Si Ting glanced at her and nodded expressionlessly. "Thank you for the compliment." After speaking, he retracted his gaze and looked at the chessboard in front of him again. The last level's Xian array was more difficult than the previous 4 levels. If one did not concentrate, it would be very difficult to solve it. Shi Wanwan was even angrier when she saw his reaction. She felt that Si Ting did not take her seriously at all. He was just temporarily in the lead. Did he have to be so arrogant? Shi Wanwan was unhappy, but she did not show it on her face. Right now she had to solve the 4th level first. However, the more nervous she was, the more she could not find a way to solve the Xian array. Xing Yiming and Su Bai were famous, but if she lost to a freshman like Si Ting, would it not be too embarrassing? After all, she was still in front of him just now. Shi Wanwan was very frustrated, but she saw that Si Ting had already started playing his chess piece, as if he was already trying to solve the problem. She glanced at Xing Yiming again and saw that he was staring at the chessboard. He didn't move for a long time, as if he was still hesitating. She bit her lip. It was fine if she lost, but Xing Yiming had been waiting for this day for too long. Xing Yiming and Su Bai seemed to have noticed Si Ting's actions and glanced at him again. When they saw Si Ting place his chess piece calmly, their expressions changed slightly. They were all mystic cultivators, so they could naturally tell if she really knew how to do it or if she was just pretending. Was Si Ting so powerful? Su Bai laughed inexplicably and began to try to place a piece, muttering in a low voice. Interesting. Xing Yiming and Shi Wanwan looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Shi Wanwan pursed her lips. Xing Yiming can't lose. She lowered her eyes and looked at the chessboard for a while, but she felt that the lines in front of her had become chaotic. She held her breath and rubbed her eyebrows hard. She knew that she had reached her limit. If she forcefully tried to crack the Xian array in this state, she would only faint like the previous people and be forced to withdraw from the competition. She was afraid that she couldn't continue in this state. Thinking of this, she gritted her teeth and stood up suddenly. "I withdraw." Her voice was especially clear in the quiet square. Everyone looked over and was a little surprised. Wasn't Shi Wanwan very hopeful before? Why did she withdraw at the last moment? The judges asked. Shi Wanwan, once you withdraw, It will be considered as you voluntarily giving up the competition. You can't go back on your words. Are you sure you want to withdraw? Xi Wanwan nodded firmly. I'm sure. After saying that, she lifted her foot and walked off the stage. When she passed by Si Ting, her hand moved slightly. However, this movement was too subtle and her hand was hidden in her sleeves so no one saw it. Si Ting, who was focused on cracking the Xianxia, suddenly felt that something was wrong. He immediately raised his hand, but it was too late. On the chessboard, a transparent thread fell quietly. The moment it touched the chessboard, the thread disappeared instantly. It completely disappeared. However, the patterns on the chessboard suddenly changed. Si Ting knew that something was wrong. In the next moment, he saw the chess pieces on the chessboard fly up. Then they scattered and fell. Crackle. The chessboard, which was originally arranged neatly, was now in a mess. The crowd was in an uproar. The chessboard fell apart on its own? This usually happened when there was a serious mistake in cracking the Xianxia. Wasn't Si Ting fine just now? Why did he suddenly become like this? Si Ting suddenly stood up and looked at Xi Wanwan. His voice was cold and angry. Xi Wanwan. Xi Wanwan had already walked to the edge of the arena. Her heart jumped when she heard that, but she looked very calm as she turned to look at him. What's wrong? Si Ting clenched his fists. You deliberately destroyed my Xianxia. Xi Wanwan was confused. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Si Ting, you can't say such things. You can't blame me for not being able to crack the Xianxia. Do you have evidence? Si Ting's face turned even colder. That thing would not leave any traces. He had focused all his attention on the Xianxia just now, which gave Xi Wanwan the chance to do it. The most important thing was that he did not expect Xi Wanwan to dare to do it so openly. Fu Yunshan also frowned in dissatisfaction. That's right. You need evidence to speak. If you can't produce evidence, you can't just slander me. Si Ting clenched his fists gradually. Xing Yiming looked up and a trace of undetectable smugness flashed across his eyes. Su Bai narrowed his eyes and looked at Xi Wanwan meaningfully, but he did not say anything. Xi Wanwan tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled faintly. I know that you're Tianlu Academy's last hope. You really want to win. However, you can't slander me for no reason just because of this, right? Didn't I take the initiative to quit? She handed the wooden token in her hand to the referees. Her expression was relaxed, but there was a hint of mockery. There shouldn't be anyone left in your academy, right? Who said that there's no one left in Tianlu Academy? A clear voice was suddenly heard. Sun Zhongyan and the others were shocked when they heard the voice. They immediately looked over in surprise. They saw a slender and straight figure standing at the entrance of the arena. Tianlu Academy's Chu Luyue is here to participate in the competition. Chapter 245. It was Chu Luyue. Everyone's eyes were focused on her and their reactions were different. Mu Hongyu and the rest immediately shouted in surprise. Luyu, you're finally here. Chu Luyue walked toward Tianlu Academy. Mu Hongyu couldn't help but rush over and grab Chu Luyue's arm. She really wanted to ask Chu Luyue where she had been for a day and a night, what she had experienced and whether she was injured. However, when she thought of the countless pairs of eyes staring at her, she held it in and stared at her closely. She was so excited that she couldn't speak. Chu Luyue felt warm inside. Sorry for making you guys worry. Mu Hongyu hurriedly shook her head. It's fine as long as you're fine. Sun Zhongyan couldn't help but size up Chu Luyue. After confirming that she was fine, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Chu Luyue smiled and said, Something happened earlier. I was delayed by something yesterday. I wonder if I can continue with the competition? Sun Zhongyan immediately said, Yes. Of course. Although there were only 2 hours left and Chu Luyue's chances of winning were slim, he still blurted out when he saw how calm she was. I don't think so. Qing Han suddenly said coldly with a frown. The competition is about to end. How can she continue with the competition now? Since she's late, she has already lost the right to continue. Sun Zhongyan retorted. Brother Qing Han, the Qingjiao competition doesn't have such a rule, right? Luyu might be late, but the competition isn't over yet. Furthermore, she did sign up earlier. How can she not continue with the competition? Qing Han hated Chu Liyue to the core. Stopping her from participating was a subconscious action. When he heard Sun Zhongyan's defense, he sneered. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. If she continued to participate in the competition today, what would happen if others followed suit in the future? Wouldn't that be chaos? Sun Zhongyan laughed. That may not be the case. Among the people present, there probably weren't many who would participate in the competition with only 2 hours left, right? In my opinion, this is not a violation of the rules. Instead, it is a display of determination. Qing Han choked. In terms of eloquence, Sun Zhongyan was the best. He could even turn black into white. Seeing this, Fu Yunshan also disagreed and said, "That's right. Brother Zhongyan, no matter how you put it, allowing her to participate in the competition with such little time remaining is truly somewhat inappropriate." Sun Zhongyan put his hands behind his back and smiled faintly. Could it be that Brother Yunshan is afraid that Lu Yu will overtake your students in the last 2 hours? Fu Yunshan's face stiffened. This was a blatant provocation. However, it was really useful. If he still disagreed, wouldn't he be indirectly admitting that his student was inferior to Chu Liyue? He snorted coldly. Since you've said so, I naturally have no reason to object. However, this is the only time. Sun Zhongyan then looked at Qing Han. What do you think, Brother Qing Han? Even Fu Yunshan had agreed. If he still objected, he would appear even more petty. Qing Han waved his sleeves. Since you insist, go ahead. I really don't believe that Chu Liyue, a stage 2 Xian master, can do anything. Situ Xingqian glanced at Chu Liyue and felt uneasy for some reason. Mentor, are we really going to allow her to continue participating just like that? This doesn't seem appropriate, right? So what if it's inappropriate? Can't you see that Sun Zhongyan is clearly trying to help Chu Liyue? Chu Liyue doesn't seem to be his disciple, but for some reason he cares a lot about Chu Liyue. As Qing Han spoke, the corners of his lips twitched in disdain. It's probably because he saw that their academy doesn't have anyone else who can participate, so he thought of a way to make up for it. However, it's really wishful thinking to let Chu Liyue help them regain their face. Let's just watch the show. If Chu Liyue can't even solve the first round, it'll be the biggest joke. Seeing that the two of them had relented, Sun Zhongyan felt more at ease. Chu Liyue said gratefully, "Thank you, Elder Sunday." Sun Zhongyan waved his hands. "What's there to thank me for? Just go up. There are only 2 hours left before the competition. You just have to do your best. Don't think too much about the rest." Actually, he didn't have much hope in his heart. Chu Liyue lightly nodded. "I'll definitely do my best." After saying that, she walked to the side of the referee and took her wooden token. Shi Wanwan furrowed her brows and looked at her. As she ranked behind Chu Liyue in the warrior competition the day before, Shi Wanwan was both jealous and fearful of Chu Liyue. When she saw the small red ball squatting on Chu Liyue's shoulder, she was a little fearful, so her attitude naturally wasn't as arrogant as when she was with Si Ting. She forced herself to maintain a calm expression. "I thought that you wouldn't come to the Xian Master competition today since you won first place in the warrior competition." Chu Liyue glanced at her lightly and her lips curved up slightly. "Why wouldn't I come? If I didn't come, how would I be able to see such a good show?" As she spoke, her gaze seemed to sweep past Shi Wanwan's hand. Shi Wanwan was shocked. Could it be that Chu Liyue knew? How could that be? She did it so silently that even the judges standing at the side didn't notice. Chu Liyue had just returned, so how could she have seen it? She must be tricking her. Shi Wanwan revealed a somewhat stiff smile. "I couldn't tell that you and Si Ting seemed to be quite close. Do you also think that I did something that caused his failure?" Chu Liyue smiled even more deeply. "This has nothing to do with friendship. It has to do with judgment." She seemed to have a headache as she tapped her eyes. "My eyes can't bear to see dirty things." Shi Wanwan shuddered for no reason. The temperature was just right and Chu Liyue was smiling in front of her, but she suddenly felt a chill from the bottom of her feet. It was as if she had seen through everything. She looked away nervously and guiltily as if she didn't want to say anything more. She turned around and left. Chu Liyue stared at her back view for a while and found it funny. She really didn't know whether to call Shi Wanwan stupid or stupid. Did she really think that no one would notice her dirty tricks? But now was not the time to pursue this. She quickly retracted her gaze and walked towards the stage. She met Si Ting. The two of them looked at each other. Si Ting's expression was a little complicated. Finally he said, "Be careful. Just do your best." Chu Luiyue nodded with a smile. This time Si Ting was indeed a pity. According to his true abilities he could definitely get first place. Unfortunately the despicable Shi Wanwan appeared halfway. The two of them brushed past each other. Chu Luiyue found her position according to the number on the wooden board. On the chessboard there weren't even any chess pieces placed. Everything seemed to have not been started yet. She held her breath and focused. With a light twist of her wrist the lines on the chessboard changed. The first round immediately appeared in front of her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 246. I really don't know what Chu Luiyue is thinking. Why is she participating at this time? There are only 2 hours left. What else can she do? Yeah. Xing Yiming and Su Bai are both true geniuses, but they also spent nearly a day to solve the 4th round and enter the final round. Isn't she just making a fool of herself by coming here now? You have to think for Tianlu Academy. They only have 2 Luiyue left now. Only one? You're saying it as if she can really win, haha. Almost everyone was not optimistic about Chu Luiyue. Even the people from Tianlu Academy were worried. Although no one said anything, the atmosphere was very solemn. This was especially so after seeing Si Ting return. Even Si Yang, who was always jumpy, did not dare to go forward and say anything. He could only obediently stay at the side and try his best to reduce his presence. He could not casually provoke Big Brother in his current mood. He clasped his hands together and started praying sincerely in his heart. Damn pervert, you must get first place. You must get first place. Suddenly there was a commotion around the arena. Si Yang turned his head in surprise and saw that everyone was looking at Chu Luiyue with subtle expressions. He followed their gazes and immediately saw that a star had lit up on the stone platform in front of Chu Luiyue. Faster, Si Yang rubbed his eyes hard and looked at it carefully again. That's right. Chu Luiyue had really solved the first round. She had entered the second round. Isn't this too fast? She was called a damn pervert, but she was really that perverted. Not only Si Yang but everyone in the arena was stunned by Chu Luiyue's extraordinary speed. Wait, did I see wrongly? Chu Luiyue has actually solved the first Xian formation? No, you didn't see wrongly. I think so too. It seems to be true. It can't be. Didn't she just go up? Although the difficulty increases with each level, the first round shouldn't be so easy to solve, right? Didn't you trap a lot of people just now? How did she do it? This commotion also attracted the attention of Xing Yiming and Su Bai. Both of them turned to look at Chu Luiyue. The first star had indeed lit up on the stone platform in front of her. As for her, her expression was still calm and collected, as if she didn't realize what a shocking thing she had just done. To be able to be so calm, he was either too focused or he already had a card up his sleeve. Su Bai's expression was a little playful, but his eyes were a little more solemn. Xing Yiming frowned slightly, and an inexplicable sense of irritation arose in his heart. From the first to the 4th stage he had always been the first to clear it. However, even for him he still spent an entire incense stick's worth of time on the first stage. However, Chu Luiyue seemed to have only glanced at it once before he unlocked it. Chu Luiyue was only a level 2 mystic cultivator, so logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to be this fast. Could it be that the first stage was a Xian formation that she had seen before? It seemed that this was the only reason that could explain how she could solve the first stage so quickly. Xing Yiming suppressed the irritation in his heart and laughed somewhat self-deprecatingly. He was really too nervous. Even if Chu Luiyue had coincidentally unlocked the first stage, there were still the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stages. These 2 hours were simply not enough for her to catch up to him. Thinking of this, he felt slightly more at ease. However, not long after, a familiar sound sounded again. Bang! That was the sound of a Xian formation being unlocked. Xing Yiming's heart trembled and he almost subconsciously turned around. Sure enough, he saw that the second star had already lit up on the stone platform in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Liwei had actually successfully passed the second stage. The spectators became even more restless. The first stage was simple, so it was understandable, but how could she even unlock the second stage so quickly? This speed had already beaten everyone in the competition today. At this time, Qing Han already felt that something was wrong. He could not help but look at Sun Zhongyan with a face full of suspicion. How could a mere level 2 mystic cultivator solve it so quickly? Could it be that she coincidentally saw a similar Xian formation before? Sun Zhongyan naturally understood what he meant, and his expression turned serious. Why, Brother Qing Han, are you suspecting that I saw through the questions? Of course not. Brother Zhongyan has always been honest. Why would you do such a despicable thing? I'm just a little curious. How could Chu Liwei be so successful? Sun Zhongyan was so angry that he laughed instead. He raised his voice and said, although the chessboard used for the Xian Master competition was provided by our Tianlu Academy, the 5 Xian formations used in the competition were jointly decided by the 3 academies. If there's a possibility that I saw through the questions, then Brother Qing Han and Brother Yunshan must be involved as well, right? Fu Yunshan immediately said, Brother Zhongyan, don't misunderstand. Brother Zhongyan, please don't misunderstand. I didn't mean that. However, I'm also a little curious. How exactly did Chu Liwei solve it so quickly? Sun Zhongyan sneered. What else can it be? Of course, it's because she's talented. This answer was so self-righteous that Fu Yunshan and Qing Han did not know how to reply for a while. Seeing that the two of them still wanted to argue, Sun Zhongyan shook his sleeves. If your students can't do it, can't others do it? This sentence completely shut the two of them up. 15 minutes passed very quickly. Bang! A familiar sound rang out. Everyone looked over and saw that the third star was already shining brightly on the stone platform in front of Chu Liwei. The originally restless crowd gradually quietened down. At this point they finally realized that Chu Liwei did not solve the Xian formation so quickly because of luck. Sun Zhongyan's words turned out to be true. Her innate talent was really rare. Chu Liwei calmly watched the chess pieces on the chessboard change. Very quickly the fourth Xian formation appeared. This time the people who had all sorts of suspicions completely shut their mouths. If Chu Liwei was not considered a genius, then no one would dare to call themselves that. Now they were only concerned about one thing: whether Chu Liwei could solve the 4th and 5th levels in the remaining hour. First place. The smile on Su Bai's face had already disappeared. Xing Yiming's hand, which was holding a chess piece, also began to tremble slightly. Even without looking back they could guess what had happened. Now they could only hope that Chu Liwei would not continue to catch up. Clack. Chu Liwei placed a chess piece. The two of them were shocked. She actually started to solve the 4th level so quickly. Immediately after, the sound of chess pieces landing on the chessboard could be heard. Chu Liu's movements were smooth, and each sound was like a death sentence, echoing in the ears of Xing Yiming and Qing Han. If one looked carefully, fine beads of sweat had already seeped out of their foreheads. No, they had to solve the last few steps quickly. However, the more they thought about it, the harder it was to succeed. On the contrary, Chu Liu's movements behind them paused and she quieted down. Xing Yiming and Qing Han looked at each other and then turned back to look. Chu Liwei was holding a chess piece and looking at the two of them with a smile. Sorry to keep you waiting. With that she placed a chess piece with a bang. Bang. The 4th star lit up at the same time. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 247. Everyone stared intently at Chu Liwei and the 4 stars that lit up in front of her. She had actually solved 4 stages consecutively and reached the last stage in such a short period of time. As long as she could solve the last Xian formation successfully, she would be the first Xian master. Previously, everyone had thought that Chu Liwei entering the competition with only 2 hours left was a joke. Now they finally understood that Chu Liwei had come prepared. She clearly had the ability to fight for first place. Finally, someone could not sit still any longer. Brother Zhongyan, shouldn't you give us an explanation now? Qing Han's face was cold and he looked like he was looking for trouble. Let's not talk about the first 3 stages. The 4th stage is a level 4 Xian formation. Chu Liwei is only a level 2 Xian master. How could she solve it? And so quickly. I request that Chu Luiyue be examined immediately. Fu Yunshan glanced at him. Although he did not say anything, he was clearly skeptical about this matter. Sun Zhongyan knew what he was thinking and immediately refused. The competition is not over yet. How can we stop? If Brother Qinghan must be examined, then the other two will have to be examined too. Qinghan sneered. I'm not the only one. Even the others here are suspicious of Chu Luiyue. How could a mere level 2 Xian master be so capable? Even if she was talented, she would not be able to do this. How do you know that she would not be able to do this? Not only was Sun Zhongyan not angry, but he also looked around and revealed a meaningful smile. Everyone may have heard that Lu Yu only entered Tianlu Academy 2 months ago. However, there's one thing that you might not know. Lu Yu only started cultivating as a Xian master after she entered the academy. Looking at everyone's shocked expressions, he snorted. This means that Lu Yu only used 2 months to go from an ordinary person to a level 2 Xian master. Everyone was dead silent. Their eyes were filled with shock. Sun Zhongyan's words were too impactful and shocking. Impossible. Cheng Han was the first to react and immediately refuted. How is it impossible? Everyone in the Imperial City has heard about this. Our academy's elders, teachers, and even students can testify. Sun Zhongyan smiled like a sly old fox. Could it be that so many people are saying the same thing just to help Chu Luiyue cover up her lie? Cheng Han was instantly speechless and his mind went blank. In reality, he knew that since Sun Zhongyan dared to say this in public, it must be true. At the very least, he could confirm that what he said was true. He could not help but look at Chu. There was such a huge commotion around her, but she, the person involved, seemed to be completely unaffected by it. She continued to break the profound formation with a calm expression. The uneasiness in his heart became stronger. Of the Xian masters. Of Xian. Of Xian master. If you still have any doubts after the competition, it won't be difficult to conduct an inspection. Of Qing Han. Of course. Of Zoff the Xian master. Qing Han did not speak for a long time. Fu Yunshan was also shocked for a long time. After thinking about it, he could only hope that Xing Yiming could solve the last level before Chu Luiyue. Wishes were beautiful, but things often went against one's wishes. Fu Yunshan quickly realized that Xing Yiming's condition was not very good. He sat there and stared at the chessboard, but he did not move for a long time. Even Su Bai, who was beside him, had already started to solve the last level, but Xing Yiming did not seem to have any clue. Fu Yunshan knew Xing Yiming very well. When he saw him like this, he immediately knew that something was wrong. Xing Yiming was good at everything except for one thing: he was too arrogant. He wanted to do his best in everything. If he lost to someone occasionally, he would enter the academy's library and study the Xian formation. He would often not come out for a day and a night. For this Qingjiao competition, he had prepared for a long time before the competition and was determined to get first place. But now, Chu Luiyue's appearance had obviously put a lot of pressure on him. Shi Wanwan had already returned to her seat, but when she saw the situation in the arena, her heart was in her mouth again. She really should not have left so early. If she had known that there was still Chu Luiyue, she would have eliminated her first. But it was too late to say anything now. She did not know if Xing Yiming could be stabilized. Chu Luiyue placed another piece. There was a slight fluctuation on the chessboard in front of her. Xing Yiming and Su Bai knew very well what this fluctuation meant. Chu Luiyue had found the correct solution. As long as she was given more time, she might really be able to get first place before them. Su Bai also followed up with a piece. The same fluctuation immediately appeared on his chessboard. Xing Yiming looked at him in shock. Su Bai just smiled and ignored him. This smile immediately made Xing Yiming realize that Su Bai had been hiding his strength all this time. Su Bai was always behind him every time. He originally thought that it was because of the difference in strength, but he did not expect that whether it was Si Ting, Su Bai, or Chu Luiyue who had appeared now, they all seemed to be stronger than him. He thought that he was the most outstanding one and had been advancing triumphantly. In reality, he was just a joke in their eyes. If he lost this time, Xing Yiming clenched the chess piece in his hand tightly as his body tensed up. He tried hard to see the lines on the chessboard in front of him, but he was so anxious that he could not focus at all. As for thinking, there was no need to mention it. If this continued, click. Su Bai was one step ahead. Chu Liwei followed closely behind. They placed a piece almost at the same time. Hearing their movements, Xing Yiming's hand trembled slightly, and he actually crushed the chess piece. This small commotion immediately attracted the attention of many people. For a moment, discussions broke out. Xing Yiming felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. Chu Liwei looked up and glanced at him indifferently as the corners of his mouth curled up. Even if someone like Xing Yiming had some talent, he would not be able to go far on the path of a Xian master. Sure enough, Xing Yiming took a deep breath and wanted to pick up another chess piece. However, his hand trembled so much that it took him a while to pick up the chess piece. He looked at the chessboard in frustration. In a moment of anxiousness, he actually placed the chess piece in a random position. The chessboard shook violently. Xing Yiming was shocked. He had made a wrong move and this game was ruined. Sensing the chaotic energy on the chessboard, an extremely dangerous thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Immediately, his hand swept across the chessboard uncontrollably. The chessboard was in chaos. The energy on the Xian array immediately exploded and rushed out in all directions. Chu Liu's eyes sharpened as he picked up the chessboard. Digression. Why am I either sleeping early or losing sleep? I'm really drunk. I already owe 4 updates today. The remaining updates are at noon. I have to find time to make up for what I owe. Asterisk sob asterisk sob asterisk sob asterisk sob asterisk sob star. Chapter 248. Su Bai realized that something was wrong and quickly got up as well, but he was still a step too late. Crash. The chessboard in front of him was affected by the force of Xing Yiming's attack and instantly flipped over. The Xian array, which had been partially cracked, became a mess in the blink of an eye. Su Bai's face instantly turned pale. Xing Yiming did it on purpose. He knew that he was no match for them, but he took the opportunity to destroy their Xian array and forcefully stopped the competition. He glared fiercely at Xing Yiming. Xing Yiming was the closest and was affected the most. He fell directly to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, when he saw the chess pieces scattered on the ground from the corner of his eye, he felt an inexplicable sense of relief. This time no one could continue. The sudden situation in the arena immediately attracted everyone's attention. Fu Yunshan's expression changed when he saw Xing Yiming's reaction. What's going on? A guilty look appeared on Xing Yiming's face. Didin, I'm sorry. It's all because of my mistake. It's easy for you to say. Now that Su Bai's chessboard is destroyed, what should we do? How are you going to compensate him? Qing Han was already in a bad mood. He could not hold back his anger when he saw this situation. He saw clearly that Su Bai was successfully cracking the Xian array, but he was interrupted by Xing Yiming. As a Xian master, you should know how much energy it takes to crack a Xian array. Now all of this has been ruined by you. Their academy's last hope was on Su Bai. It did not matter if Xing Yiming was useless, but he actually dared to drag Su Bai down with him. Sun Zhongyan frowned and said, since it's like this, I'm afraid the competition will be temporarily suspended. However, Qing Han was unwilling. The competition was going well. How can it be suspended just like that? The progress of the previous 3 people was already different. If it was restarted, it would be too unfair. He originally thought that Chu Liwei was already troublesome enough, but he did not expect Xing Yiming to be so troublesome. Sun Zhongyan was also in a bad mood. Everyone could see that Xing Yiming was starting to fall behind. Lu Yu originally had hopes of competing with Su Bai. Now that they had to redo it, Lu Yu would be at a disadvantage. This lass had been competing for the past few days and had gone off to some unknown place last night. Now she had directly rushed over to continue participating in the Mystic Master competition. Only the heavens knew how long that small body could last. If it weren't for the fact that they were the organizers of the Qingjiao competition, he would have definitely caused a ruckus. Fu Yunshan was the most guilty. But since it had already come to this point, it would be wrong to retreat. He coughed and said, this matter is indeed Yiming's fault. But now that things have come to this, I'm afraid we really can't continue. Why don't we let the children rest for a while and we'll come up with a new profound formation test? Sun Zhongyan and Qing Han fell silent. Now that things had turned out this way, this was probably the only suitable compromise. Sun Zhongyan hesitated. Since that's the case, let's do as Brother Yunshan says. Actually, he had some selfish motives in his heart. He was worried that Chu Liyue wouldn't be able to withstand the continuous rotation. If he could take advantage of this opportunity to rest, it might not be a bad idea. Xing Yiming lowered his head and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. However, a sense of joy and pride emerged in his heart. If he were to start over, he might not necessarily lose to those two. Hold on. Chu Liyue, who had been standing at the side without saying anything, suddenly spoke. She stared at Sun Zhongyan and said word by word, "Elder son, I request for the competition to continue." Everyone looked at her in unison, their gazes strange. The competition had already become like this. How could it continue? Even Sun Zhongyan was in a difficult position. He tried to persuade Lu Yu, "I understand how you feel, but the chessboard is already destroyed. There's no way to continue the competition." "My chessboard isn't destroyed yet." Chu Liyue calmly said this sentence, but it immediately stirred up a storm in everyone's hearts. "What? Are you serious?" Sun Zhongyan exclaimed in shock. Xing Yiming also suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue opened the chessboard in her arms. The chess pieces on it didn't move at all. Even the ripples produced by the half-broken Xian formation were the same as before. Her chessboard was indeed in perfect condition. Sun Zhongyan was surprised and delighted. He never expected that Chu Liyue could actually protect her chessboard in that situation just now. "Since your chessboard isn't damaged, there's naturally no reason to stop the competition. It's just that the others..." Xing Yiming did not say anything, but Su Bai was really wronged. When the city gate caught fire, the fish in the moat would suffer. It did not seem good to let Chu Liyue continue the competition alone. Chu Liyue smiled faintly and asked, "Elder son, you can repair this chessboard, right?" Sun Zhongyan was taken aback. "Of course. What do you mean?" "Please help Su Bai with his chessboard. When it's repaired, I'll continue the competition with him at the same time." Sun Zhongyan's eyes lit up. Why didn't he think of that? "Su Bai, do you remember how far you've gone just now?" Su Bai nodded. "That's good. It should take half a quarter of an hour to repair it. This way the competition would not be delayed and it would be fair enough for everyone." With that said, he raised his hand and Su Bai's chessboard flew toward him. A stream of light flickered on his fingertips, and the chaotic lines on the chessboard quickly became clear. Su Bai watched from the side and carefully explained where he had cracked the chessboard previously. Sun Zhongyan's movements were extremely fast, and the entire chessboard was restored at a speed visible to the naked eye. After checking it, he returned the chessboard to Su Bai. "Take a look and see if it's done properly." Su Bai took it with both hands, carefully checked it, and bowed to Sun Zhongyan with a serious expression. "Thank you, Elder Sunday." After that, he looked at Chu Liyue and nodded. "Thank you." "You're welcome. It's just a fair competition. I don't want people to say that I won unfairly." Chu Liyue smiled faintly and found a new seat to sit down. Su Bai did not say anything more. However, his impression of Chu Liyue had greatly changed. Xing Yiming was left in place. He was stunned for a while. Seeing that the two were about to start, he suddenly jumped up in panic. "Wait a minute. My chessboard hasn't recovered yet." Even if they wanted to continue the competition, they had to wait for him to pack up, right? How could it be so sudden? Chu Liyue rested her chin on one hand and gave him a lazy look. She smiled faintly. "If I remember correctly, your Xian array collapsed just now because you cracked it wrongly, right? According to the rules, this seems to be considered elimination?" Although she did not continue, everyone could hear the meaning behind her words. As a person who had already been eliminated, how could he still have the nerve to continue standing here? Xing Yiming's words were suddenly stuck in his throat, and his face was full of excitement. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.